Axios BFD San Francisco will begin in just a moment.
Welcome aboard.
To kick Axios BFD San Francisco off, please welcome to the stage Axios business editor Dan Primack.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out today for our second annual Axios BFD here in New York City. We have, wow. Continue, that's fine. San Francisco, hello. Thank you so much for coming out. We have a great lineup for you today, talking everything from private equity to venture capital to AI to crypto and more. Please, for the folks who are on this camera in front of me, if you're following this along on the socials, hashtag Axios BFD. And there's no reason to not just get started. Our first guest today, most of you probably know, he is a multiple Super Bowl champion. He is an NFL Hall of Famer, and he is now a private equity executive with HGGC, a firm he co-founded. Please welcome Steve Young.
How are you, buddy?
Good.
I did not play for the New York Giants, so don't screw that up, all right? Jeez, enough of that.
I know you played for the Jets. So Steve, so your career, your football career ends. Most people know you for stuff you did on the field. Why exactly was private equity your next move? And admittedly, a long time ago, 17 years now, but why was it private equity?
It's a long story. We were investing out of the locker room when we were the 49ers in the mid-90s in Santa Clara when the Silicon Valley was exploding around us, and John Chambers was I'd throw a bad pass and hit him in the head. So it's like they were all around. And so we started to invest out of the locker room, and that got me away from law school. I'd gone to law school while I was playing, thinking that I'd end up in the legal profession. And then we started a business right at the end of my career called Found.com, and kind of enablement to retailers at the time when they were worried about Amazon. My buddy from college, had kind of an algorithm around a geographic boundary around an internet search. And so that started me into business. It was backed by Excel, KKR, and Bain, and that's what kicked me into the business side. And then that also just ended up kicking me into private equity about a year later, which was, I cut the line, right? I didn't get in consulting. I wasn't a banker. I was a founder before I was an associate. So, I mean, these are the kind of things I was entrepreneurial about it, but that's how it all happened. It happened kind of out of the locker room when we were investing in up and down Sand Hill Road with all our friends.
And that was because you were physically in San Francisco. In other words, you don't think peers in Chicago or New England or New York?
No, it's because it was happening as we drove into, like you drive into work in Santa Clara, you'd run into all these businesses that were exploding in Silicon Valley in the mid-90s. You couldn't miss it. And so, yes, I think it was mostly because we were in San Francisco at the time.
Yeah, there's a lot of pro athletes who end up at venture capital firms or private equity firms, and they seem to kind of call them celebrity partners, right? They get brought in to seal a deal here or there. You seem to not be that. You never have been that. Was there a temptation to be that, to be the guy who calls in once a month when you're needed and just collect your check?
That's just not how I started. My hero, Roger Staubach, was a quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. We became good friends, and he was very successful in the Staubach company afterwards. And I go, Roger, what do I do now that I'm finished playing? He goes, run. And so that's why I started. I ran away. He said, just get away from it and start something new. Have the humility to start over. And I went into private equity with that humility. I didn't go into private equity because I could use all my contacts and all my experience. And no, I went in to start and become a financial investor. I want to be an investor. I want to be professional. I went down to the roots. And so that's why for me, it's different than if you join a firm and you're just going to be the guy that's, I'm not going to say glad-handing, but just,
you can say glad-hand.
You know what I mean? I didn't want to be that. It's fine. There's no problem if you do that. It's a great way to get into private equity and be around it. But I just ran away and started to. The people I joined with to start my private equity career, very smart, classic private equity trained, and they allowed me in because I was willing to do the work. And I think I had to follow up with that. It took me 15 years to start using my relationships from my previous life into my investing world. We now have a sports kind of thematic sourcing after all these years. And then we get into a meeting with the business owners in sports, like, where have you been? I'm like, I just took some time to figure out that it was okay to bring the two worlds together for me.
To mix metaphors a little bit, what would be the basic scouting report on you as an investor?
I would think that it would be, I tend to bring my previous life in football to business in that we're going to find a way across the line. All the metaphors work, but we're going to find a way to cross the goal line. Like, even if we have we can be arguing and haggling and having a really tough conversation. I even had chairs thrown at me. I've had a lot of things happen in business.
Wait, when was a chair thrown at you?
It was a tough moment. I laughed because the guy tried and didn't. I don't know if he was aiming at me. He was just very frustrated, and I chuckled and I said, "That's all you can do is just you didn't even throw it that far. Like, that was not that." But I think for me, what I would say my scouting report would be that I'll figure out a way to not lose myself in the weeds. We'll get to yes in a more abundant way is the way I think about it, because I think football taught me how to do that.
Let me ask you a couple of just kind of macro private equity questions, then get into some other things. There was a consensus going into the year that private equity deal making was going to go up because interest rates were going to get cut and y'all were going to want to start doing deals. Interest rates didn't get cut, yet deals have surged, like 50% in the US for private equity. What's driving deals right now?
I think there's some concerns about the looming election. I think that's
so you think people are trying to pull things
that
forward?
happens, right? Pull forward, just get liquid before things could possibly go haywire, whatever's going to happen, good or bad. I think that's emotion there. I think also that there's indigestion when there's a big inflation moment, like up or down, and when it went up and the fears go up and interest rates go up, then sellers hold on. Like, it takes 18 months for them to kind of capitulate. It takes about 18 hours for buyers to capitulate. Like, they get it, but there's that indigestion. I think people are now, this is the new normal. The fact that interest rates didn't drop, as long as they don't go back up again, that would freak everybody out. This is a stable, in their mind, to me, investors today, it's a stable environment. And in a stable environment, you can start to invest.
On the exit side of things, limited partners in venture and private equity, when I talk to them, they have the same complaint constantly, which is, where is my money? You called down, everybody called down a while ago, and there have been relatively few distributions. I know one of your portfolio companies you sold last year, but you look, for example, at IPOs, those don't seem to be getting pulled forward right now. As you say, there's an election, but there's been like a couple of them. Why aren't you guys selling more companies?
We're selling businesses, and we're doing, that's actually one of the things that we've been successful at. And there is a lot of activity. And we are returning money. DPI matters to investors today, and our firm has always been one of the highest DPIs in private equity. So in that way, we haven't grown astronomically. We never wanted to be asset managers. We've invested out of $1 billion, $1.5 billion, $1.8 billion, $2.5 billion. We're very kind of steady in our growth, and in that way, we looked a little bit, like, why don't we're the same size that Vista was in 2009 when we saw each other at the Patriots game. And we decided we want to be deal makers, we want to be asset managers, and in that way, that probably in the 2010s to 20s, it looked a little bit maybe not the best strategy. And now today, it feels like, this is our parade.
2009 was when the Patriots still got to be on Monday Night Football. That was a good time. I liked that time. You mentioned that HGGC is kind of has like the sport. What exactly are you guys looking at inside of sports?
Well, it's going to be more services businesses, and there's some technology inside of sports. We're not looking for minority stakes. I'm not looking to see what the NFL is going to do and allow private equity. And oh my gosh, now I can build a portfolio of the Saints and the Falcons and no, that is not what I want to do. I think that there's a lot of businesses around sports, especially in the kids and in young adult, in the clubs and what they're doing in service and in technology. There's a lot of cool stuff happening. So that's the kind of things we're looking for.
You mentioned the NFL. So the NFL has long only allowed individuals to own teams. They are now, I guess, talking about letting private equity in, like the NBA did, like Major League Baseball has done. What do you think about that? Does it make sense for both sides? Should private equity have minority stakes in NFL clubs?
Well, equity values have skyrocketed so far that there's this logjam of equity that's stuck generationally, and they've got to figure out a market to kind of make it more liquid. And so they've got to hold on to this unique partnership ownership model that they have in the NFL, which is unique. And they got to be, they're going to step into this slowly, but they will find a way to do it because they need a market to find ways to, for people that are trying to generationally estate. A lot of these are family-owned businesses. It's been a long time, multi-generations. And and it's been successful in the NBA. It's been successful in the Major League Baseball. And the NFL thinks of themselves as the kings. And so now it's been proven in some of the minor, don't quote me on this, but I'm just thinking how they look at it. Kind of the minor leagues, the NFL probably sees that this is probably something they could do.
Do you think, you know the NFL very well, you know private equity very well. Culturally, is it a good fit? Does it work?
Yeah, I think that it will professionalize. Some of the problems with the NFL is these generational ownership families. There's rigor that comes with private equity returns. There's bad things that you got to be careful. I always say as I come in as a private equity professional, I recognize the private equity is not built perfectly. In fact, it has a fuse, and now I have to find liquidity, and you have to do it in the next few years, and you don't have I would love to be generational capital. We're not. And so in that way, bringing non-generational capital into the NFL probably will force better standards inside financial rigor, and I think hopefully that would end up out on the field, because the idea is that I always said, if you have a problem with your team, that you don't think that we're as good, you don't like the coach, you don't like the general manager, make sure you look at the owner as well, because so much of why you're good or bad comes down from who that owner is.
Assuming that the NFL allows, why haven't you, or why doesn't HGGC want to be in the pro team, whether it be the NFL or other leagues, European soccer, why don't you guys want to be in that business?
Well, because for me, intuitively, I feel like the equity values are just,
but they always go up.
Well, I know, but I think the problem is, it's like if you're an old quarterback, you've played long enough. Every play, there's plays that you've run before that you've thrown interceptions on, and you think to yourself, "Well, that's a bad play." Well, not necessarily a bad play. It's just the owner-operator. The operator was a problem, right? That's the issue. This is the situation with me. I've been around the NFL so long, and equity values are so high. I'm like, for me, from where I've been there from the beginning. I'm like, I'm not going to join that parade now. It's probably an operator problem. It's an investor problem. It's not. There's nothing wrong with investing in the NFL.
Would your bet be that if the next team that sells for whatever it is, maybe a big team, maybe a small team, do you expect the value in 10 years, 20 years, the value for the next sale of that team will be higher with almost no exception?
80 of the top 100 TV shows in the last year were NFL football games. 80 of the top 100. The domination of the NFL and what it means, the equity live, especially with AI, the more and more in time, you got to figure that as human beings, we're going to say, what's real? Well, I know that when I'm going to the stadium and I'm going to watch the 49ers play the Rams, I'm watching something real, and it's going to be, that's not going to go away. So equity values, I can see why it's investable even today, even though I have my own, idiosyncrasies about it. It's definitely investable today. And you'll see a rush. They're going to limit probably 5. Every firm can have 5 stakes in different teams. I think you'll see a rush to it.
You were in the Middle East last week for business things. Do you think the NFL will allow, for example, Saudi PIF or other kind of sovereign wealth funds from the Middle East to be part of the buying, assuming there is buying?
Yeah, I think especially if we start to build more bridges and build more strategic relationships and recognize what people are trying to do in the Middle East, the changes that are happening, I get a sense that I can see the stabilization of those relationships allowing that kind of stuff. I think that you're seeing that in Europe and European soccer really heavily, and you're seeing in European soccer, both domestically in the Middle East and all over the world, coming in, and I think the NFL inevitably will be similar to that kind of superstructure.
You talk about these massive valuations. They are enormous. They're in the billions, multiple billions of dollars. They're not the sort
multiple.
Of
it's the double digits now.
It's not the sort of thing that even the most successful players, for the most part, can get a piece of. Brady maybe being the exception to that.
Has anyone been able to get a piece?
No, not yet.
Not really, right? The NFL's been amazing. The desire we all had when we were playing, first of all, because football had...
Everyone wants to be the boss.
Baseball had guaranteed contracts. You sign a 5-year contract, you get paid no matter what. Football, it was day to day. You might sign a $30 million contract, but it's guaranteed tomorrow. Well, not even tomorrow, just today. And so we had such desire for guaranteed contracts, or player equity was like this dream. And so I can guarantee you there is an incredible interest for players. And if you think about it, if enough time went by, an infinite amount of time went by, all leagues would be owned by players, right? Given enough time, the players would realize, wait a second, why am I not owning my game? And I think that you can see that now. I think the NBA is ripe for that. I think golf is for sale today.
Yeah.
Like I would tell the players today, golfers, take the top 50 guys, go buy, get Goldman and find debt financing and go buy it. You could be equity owners of golf, you know. But players, we just, I don't know. We're more mercenary every week. You got to go, you know.
So it sounds like you shouldn't be a partner in a private equity firm. You should be like an advisor, like a pro athlete financial advisor.
I'm going to open a consultancy tomorrow. Thanks to you and me, Dan. We'll do it.
I'm in. It's a very good gig. Last kind of football question, although I'm going to go into a kind of different thing, is even though it's not the same league, when you started in pro football, you did not start in the NFL. You started in the USFL, which is sort of back under a new ownership, new everything. Does it seem strange for you for that league, that name to be back?
No, in fact, this is mid '80s now, so I'm sorry, that's how old we are. It was a league that had made its space in the spring, and had filled stadiums, had a number of teams that was the #1 ticket in the city at the time. The cities that were like San Antonio and Birmingham and Jacksonville and Tampa and Oklahoma City, and in the bigger ones I played in LA even. So to me, it was established, and they just would have stayed in the spring. They would have stayed and been able to compete.
So can I ask the obvious question? From your perspective, did Trump destroy the USFL?
Whoever moved them to the fall ruined the USFL.
Something else you've been involved in, you spoke in an NFL owners meeting. That was a good way of dodging the name. You spoke recently at NFL owners meeting about girls flag football. You coach both your daughters in high school right now. It's coming to the Olympics apparently in
2028.
Just talk to me a little bit, what's the experience been like coaching it? What have you learned from coaching it?
Wow, it was an explosion, revelation for me. My kids came home from the first day of practice, and because I was excited for them to go play, I was like, great. My two boys, older boys, didn't play any football, so it was the first time football was in our home. And they came home so excited. And the coach said, Steve, can you come and help out? You know, I'm like, come on, Dad, come on. So I went over the next day. So I will tell you, from that moment, I walked over the first practice, and what hit me was the visceral sense of inclusion that I felt from them. The girls were so excited to be a part of football, a game that they'd seen their whole lives, their brothers played, and they now were able to play it. And the next thing I realized is they didn't know anything about it. They wanted, I felt included, I can't wait to play, what is it? And so it was amazing to watch them learn the game, and from scratch, the first practice was like, okay, so how do I hold the ball? And I'm like, I don't know, I haven't thought about that for a long time. You know, how do I throw it? I was like, how do I describe that, right? So that was, for me, it was bringing it all back home. It was, to me, it was visceral. It felt really wonderful. And then what I realized as we taught them the game, that football's made for girls.
What do you mean by that?
Think about football. It's a series of plays, series of choreographed plays. The choreography, once the girls realize that, wait a second, this is a dance step. This is like just run the lines and you'll thrive. And I'm like, yeah, and you can affect the defense this way and this way. And they're like, oh my gosh, you're kidding me. And then it was like they just ate it up. And like, I gotta be honest with you, I played with professional athletes, boys, men, that couldn't go on the second snap count. Like we'd go on one 98%, 99% of the time, and every once in a while we'd go, let's go on two, okay? Then the whole way up the line of scrimmage, they'd be like, we're going on two, remember two. Then I'd go, hut, and they'd all jump off sides. You know, and you're like, oh my gosh. And the girls
played for the Buccaneers.
Once I realized, but I'm telling you once I realized, I told the girls about going on different snap counts. They're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. They would go on 5. No one flinched. Like, I'm just telling you, there was, from my anecdotal experience, coaching the girls, football is made for girls. They sensed what the game was, and because you took out the physical part and just played the athletic part, by the end of the year, I turned to the coach of the team. I was just the assistant, you know, little guy that showed up late. I said, John, I think the girls could beat the boys, as long as we kept the physicality out of it, because of this detail that they had around the game and their love of the game.
Is it big enough? The fact that it's going to LA for the Olympics in 28, it's big enough in terms of number of people playing, number of girls and women
Not
playing?
yet, but I guarantee you it's going to take over volleyball. It'll rival dance. It'll rival gymnastics. The love that they had, they loved the inclusion at first. At the end of the season, everyone said that's the most fun they ever played playing a sport. So I think it's going to explode in a way that no one can even realize.
Let me ask a couple final questions. You were part of the ESPN football crew for about 20 years. You were part of, unfortunately, the cuts last summer.
Oh, thanks, Dan. You said I got fired? Thanks, I appreciate that.
I'm saying there
I
was
thought I aged
Steve,
out, but now I got fired. Okay, fine.
So let me ask you about your former employer. Should ESPN still be part of Disney? Is that the best place for it?
I mean, it's all entertainment, and in a way, live entertainment and entertainment in general is going to rule the world into the future. So the idea that they're together can't be a bad thing, right? Is it most efficient? Is it perfect? That's above my pay grade. I don't even have an opinion about it. I just know that ESPN's changing. It's having to figure out new ways to bring viewers in. It's not the classic. The old ways of doing it are just going to be different. You think it's, we all know what's happening in streaming and podcasts and eyeballs are just, they come in a different way, and ESPN's got to figure out how to do that.
Do you think it's good? There's talk that Netflix and Amazon right now are fighting for Christmas Day games. Is it good, do you think?
Wait, Netflix and Amazon are fighting.
Correct.
To
be the ones
think about that. So it's inevitable that you're going to, look, well, last year they went on, was it Peacock, and they made everyone pay, and everyone's like up in arms, but what happened?
People paid. everyone
Everyone paid. Because the NFL has inelastic as any business in the history of man. That nothing can happen that could pull it down. And so in that way, the pressure for ESPN and NBC and CBS are, it's going to come from all, I can't believe that Google's not in the middle of it, right? I mean, like, in the future, that's where all the eyeballs are going to be in watching football. Especially now the girl, I mean, that's the thing about it, you don't realize, if I'm right, and my anecdotal experience is right, in 2028, when it's in the Olympics for girls flag football, there will be 100 million girls playing football. And you're just like, wait, what? And they're going to say, they will say in 2028, Steve Young was right, football's made for girls. See, that's when it's going to all come around for everybody.
Let me ask a quick Netflix question. Would you have allowed, when you retired, a roast of you like the Brady roast the other day?
No. I wouldn't mind it. I like laughing at myself. It's one of my favorite things. It's one of my favorite techniques in leading is to be self-deprecating. My wife hates it. She goes, you're too self-deprecating. It's getting sick. I don't like it. It's like, well, okay, I can, but I enjoy, I like laughing. And I laugh at myself as much as anything. So in that way, I think it could be really funny, but it could be really hard for the people like my family members, my wife, it could be really tough. So I wouldn't mind it. But I think my people around me would really struggle.
We like to finish with one fun thing, so let me ask. I'm going to leave football and private equity out, but I'm going to ask about which you feel was a greater accomplishment in your life. You threw a no-hitter in high school. You also guest starred on Beverly Hills 90210 in its heyday.
Yeah, that was.
Which is the one that you want to like?
What was the last one?
Beverly Hills 90210 or the no-hitter?
The no-hitter? Well, the no-hitter was the day after the prom. And I think everybody had a little too much to drink maybe, so that was my no-hitter doesn't really count. So I'll say 90210 was the big moment.
Steve Young, thank you so much.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Please give it up for Axios Chief Technology Correspondent, Ina Fried.
Everyone. Thanks. I'm glad you're all here in my city, despite what you may have heard. This is San Francisco. It's my first time at BFD. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ina Fried. I'm author of our daily Axios AI Plus newsletter. If you don't subscribe, you can get it at aiplus.axios.com. And if you'll indulge me for just a minute, I want to plug another upcoming Axios event. In less than a month, we'll be having our first Axios AI Plus Summit of the year, June 5th in New York. It'll be a very immersive half day filled with lots of cool demos and some great interviews, including former OpenAI board member Helen Toner, the CEO of Gecko Robotics, Lux Capital partner Grace Isford, and many others. So you can join us in person, or if you're not planning on being in New York for Tech Week, it'll also be streaming. And I'm also excited to announce here publicly for the first time our West Coast edition of the Axios AI Plus Summit will be right back here in San Francisco on December 17th, which also, according to sources, happens to be my 50th birthday. So we're going to have a big party. It'll be fun. You should come. Anyway, back to the present moment. I'm thrilled we get to interview in our next conversation Google's Chief Health Officer, Dr. Karen DeSalvo, and particularly a thank you to Dr. DeSalvo because Google had its big event of the year, Google I/O, this morning. I was covering it from here for Axios, but Dr. DeSalvo actually made it from Shoreline back here, which, if you know the freeways, that's no small feat. Please welcome Dr. Karen DeSalvo. Thanks so much. Well, that was a tough act to follow, but we're gonna see what we can do.
I'm storing up all my football analogies, trying to get ready to impress the crowd.
So I want to mostly focus on where Google's health business is today and where you're focused on, but I think it's important. Google's played around in the health field for a long time. There have been some stops and starts. At one point, what was called Google Health was shut down. So how has the strategy kind of evolved and where is the focus today?
When you think about health at Google, it's good to start by just remembering that it's built into our founder's letter that we want to improve knowledge, success, health, and happiness for everybody on the planet. And our mission as a company is to organize the world's information and make them universally accessible and useful. What better way to do that than focusing on health? Because there is so much information in health, 30% of the world's data every year comes from health. The way that we've learned to evolve our approach to health has been to build it as a use case into all of our products. You mentioned some of the prior ways that we work to address health. In the earlier version, it was thinking about a consumer wanting access to their personal health data, creating a health record. It was at a time before that information was really digitized. Then we had a period where we thought, well, let's just move everything into one unit and build health AI work. What we learned, particularly in the pandemic, which was just about the time that I joined the company, is that every day 500 million people are knocking on our front door, which is search, asking us a health question. And we had, even during the pandemic, on surfaces like YouTube, about 110 billion views on just COVID stuff alone. So we have a really important consumer-facing front door and needed to strengthen our health information quality. So it was one of the very early things that I was tasked with doing when I got there. Now the team not only supports those product areas, but our hardware areas. So Pixel, we bought Fitbit, so think about wellness all the way to detection like AFib, and then work we're doing now on the phone. And then, of course, on the enterprise side, we have cloud. So we've woven it into all of our product areas as opposed to trying to put it in one space, because that's a platform. Those are platforms that can help carry it out to the people who are asking for it already.
And so I want to touch on each of these areas. I also want to touch on the developing world, but I have a feeling for this crowd, they're especially interested in how's this going to make a bunch of money for Google. And I think certainly from a business standpoint, the US healthcare sector, it's known for being having lots of challenges fiscally, clinically, et cetera. Where is Google playing today, and what role does AI have in terms of directly businesses with the US healthcare system?
We think about this as doing good and doing well, and we believe both are possible. And I'll give you a few examples of those along the way. In US healthcare, most certainly, our cloud business is a really important part of helping enterprises, hospitals, healthcare systems, pharma, med tech companies, med device companies, but that you can repeat that all around the world. So we have cloud services in Europe and in Asia Pacific. So we're working with the healthcare sector, with the industry, with the enterprises to make their businesses more efficient, to help them innovate. And we do that principally through AI. And the way that we do that principally is of course, our lower stack, which is an opportunity for storage and analytics and some of the traditional things. And then we have something called the Vertex Model Garden, which exposes APIs to a multitude of models, including generative AI models, some that are medically tuned. And so think of that as a principal way that we work with the healthcare ecosystem. It's not the only way. So we want our customers to do well, and part of that is through our cloud relationship. But it's also true on sort of other parts of our services. We want people to have a good experience, a great experience on search. We want when you search on something about diabetes that, as of today, you'll be able to get a really nice summary of what that is from Gemini, and that's going to keep you coming back for more. Same thing on YouTube.
I want to look at the generative AI piece specifically in the context of healthcare delivery. So not so much on the consumer side, but how are doctors, how is Google going to market there? Who's using it, and what are they doing with it today?
It has been such an intense 18 months in this space. You know, I've been in medicine for 30 years, practiced for about 20, and I feel like I wish I were just starting, because the opportunity that I see us unfolding is kind of a once in a lifetime. I've just never seen this much kind of innovation. We were very much in a wow space in the beginning of this about 12, sort of last winter of 22 and 23, when we started to take the base models. At the time it was Palm, and send them to medical school. So medically tune them. We created something called MedPalm that surpassed any other models, and was basically like a high-performing medical student. And now have been taking a version of that model. We've actually put it on top of more advanced models, base models, and we expose an API to healthcare systems, payers around the world. And watching them take what we developed in the laboratory way of research, and then we work with them when they begin to use it in the field as they sort out problems to solve. So for example, HCA is one of our, I think, most innovative partners. And Sam Hazen is he's the CEO, quite focused on seeing how they're going to be a leader in healthcare in use of AI. And they've got a stream of work in the back office. So looking at the bottom line opportunities they have, how can they improve efficiencies across their business? And then they're using it in the clinical environment, or testing it. In particular, the signature thing they've wanted to address is nurse burnout. And what nurses told them is that the handoff at shift time, when they had to stare at computers and collect information, was taking them away from doing things with the patients at that moment. And so could we help improve the efficiency? So that shift change, a summarization of what happened in those hours of that shift, handing that off to the next nurse, is an example of how they're seeing how it's useful in the clinical environment. And I, by the way, love that they're thinking about nurses, because a lot of the use cases that people are thinking about in healthcare is how to make doctors happier. I'm a doctor, I'm married to one, we like to be happier, but it's also true that on the front lines every day, there's a lot of workers like nurses who definitely need a lot of help. So that's an example here in the US of a company that's taking something we developed in research, we've now put it in their hands through cloud, and then we're actually in the healthcare system. I've been down in Nashville and visited with them to see how it starts to work in the field, and what use cases are helpful to them.
And I hear a lot about the potential in sort of developed world healthcare for, maximizing patient time. So taking notes for doctors, in this case, taking notes for nurses. One of the things that I've seen in generative AI is it's really good at doing like 80% of it, and it's really hard to get the last little bit. I use something called Otter, for example, to transcribe my notes. It's changed my life. I can ask questions of my notes, but it doesn't get the quotes exactly right. I have to go back and listen. Now that's a moderate problem for me, but I suspect if you're transcribing notes for a doctor and it changes 20 milliliters to centiliters, that's a life or death issue. How big of an issue is this sort of 80-20 thing, or whatever you see in your results? And how do you make sure that, because the level of acceptable error is pretty low when you're talking that sort of thing?
Well, our foundational principle is first do no harm, which is an important tenet in medicine. And having
I don't think you were the first to come up with that.
I was not. Okay. There are a few generations before me, but I think that can sound cautious to people, but when there is life and death, as you say, it's worth being slow and testing. It's also important to know that when you build the models in the laboratory, just like if you create a drug in the laboratory, when you put it into humans, when you put it into clinical practice, you have to continue studying its effectiveness, safety, quality, and we're doing that with our models. And what we find is that, that just as you'd imagine, as they come out of the laboratory, they still perform well, but they don't have all the context sometimes. And medicine's multimodal. So we've really been working very quickly to move from text reading to something that can read images and audio and video, because that's how medicine is practiced. You're sensing and taking in a lot of information. And we're finding, at least in the laboratory, some of the research papers we published, that multimodal actually gets the models a little over the hump and presents then something that's more useful to the clinician. And this is such an important point, is that it is, I think of it like the medical student that was gonna gather the case for me and then bring me the information. It was still my job as the attending to make sure that it was all correct, to look for errors, but also look for diagnostic opportunities or things that might have been missed. So we always think of human in the loop, but boy, having that first pass is such a time saver. And then it also sometimes finds things that you didn't know was going to be in the record because you didn't have time to search all of it. I think eventually we're going to get to a place where quality and safety start to meet a bar where we feel like it can be, the ecosystem, like it can be more real-time production. But right now, most of the experiences are that it needs a lot of human oversight, and it's a lot of test and learn, and just about any use case you have, just like if you're using it for your email.
So that's the note-taking piece. Another piece that's been talked about now for a long time, this is less generative and more machine learning, is, radiology is kind of the classic example. We heard, it's going to be great at detecting, all these types of things, and the early tests were great. And then, as it turned out, people have different skin tones and, larger bodies, and things move around. It didn't prove to be quite as good. Then there was discussion, well, it's not just a doctor plus AI. The best thing is a doctor who knows AI. Where are you seeing some of that work go? And just as context, I think you guys recently said that MedGemini 3D was the first LLM capable of generating reports for 3D scans, which is really exciting, huge. But only about half the reports were clinically acceptable. So what does it take, again, similar problem, different context, to where it's 90% or whatever you need it to be clinically useful?
So the straight shot AI. So this is, the sort of second generation where you could build code, train a model to do a task, read a mammogram, read a chest X-ray, read a path slide. We've done a lot of work like that at Google, and we've worked with external partners like iCAD for mammography reading, or partners that we have in India or Thailand, where we have developed AI that can read a retinal image and detect whether someone's having a risk of developing blindness. From diabetes, now we have partners who have taken those tools and they're using them in the field. The downside of those models is that they only do one thing. And so the multitude of tasks that you have to do in medicine, you have to have so many of those models. That's where generative AI, is this next generation, is so exciting, because you can build a model and teach it like you teach a nurse or a doctor, and then put it to task for multiple things. Now that comes with it inherent challenges about how to evaluate safety and quality and what it will be useful for. But one of the exciting opportunities I think that we have right now in understanding the usefulness of these models is, how are we going to think about them in two ways? One, how are we going to develop them and assess quality and safety almost in the way that we do for physicians? So when I went to med school, I had to take exams through med school. I had to do a residency, take an exam following that to be boarded, do continuing medical education. There may be a model like that we need to think about for medicine.
So the AI systems themselves are going to have to pass the test before we let them play doctor.
They will, but I may be very biased here. I don't think they'll ever be ready to play doctor for a couple of reasons that to just get back to your question, which is, so much of what you do in medicine isn't just about reading the path slide. You actually understand the patient's history. You understand their risk factors. There are a lot more dynamics and context to it, essentially, than just the reading of the pixels. And we have definitely learned that medicine is not only multimodal, but it is complex because humans are complex, and it takes more than just book knowledge. You have to have clinical experience, which the human also contributes to the work. One of the other things, that we've learned is, you mentioned doctors who understand AI, those two things together. Just because you build a model and stick it into the clinical environment doesn't mean it's going to get used. I mean, there's so many stories of just the pop-up box shows up for the decision support, and there's a click, click, close that. I'm smarter than the model. I don't need it to help me. And so building that into workflow, we've done a lot of work like that. For example, with Northwestern, we're doing on mammogram work, so that can we create an opportunity that it's good for the patient? They're still in the mammo suite when their film gets read, so they don't have to go back and go home and come back. And can it also sort the queue, so the radiologist sees it before their eyes get too tired? So figuring out really hand in glove with the teams what's useful. But so all of that is a resistance to using AI and sort of learning how to put it into workflow. I do want to say that I think one of the challenges on the horizon for Gen AI, so not single task, but one that sort of is part of the medical team, which is the direction that I think we're going, is there will be some automation bias. And so there's another reason for clinicians of all sorts to be conscious of the fact that just because the model says this is the diagnosis, there's going to be much more to be understood. And some folks like Bob Wachter at UCSF have written very well about this. And I think these are horizontal issues where it used to be we worried that docs would not use the AI, but now we worry they might use them too much, and there may be some automation bias. So also thinking about the workflow, when do you present the information from the bot? What's the right timing, and then how do you present it in such a way?
Because you could do it in some interesting ways. You could do it, and I'm sure you've studied some of this. For example, you could have it there totally as a backup that just sounds an alarm if they say your screen looks clean, and it's like, whoa, it doesn't look clean to me. So that would eliminate what you're talking about the most, but you'd get the least benefit. You could have it early on. That brings up a set of problems. But it does seem like there should be a world where the combination of a skilled professional and the AI really does add up to more than either of them alone, right? That's still...
I did not coin this phrase either, but I believe in it, which is that that AI won't replace doctors, but doctors who use AI will replace doctors who don't. I just don't see a world in which that's not true. And having practiced for 20 years, I can tell you that any time that I'm going to be able to have a part of my medical team, even if it's an AI bot, that's going to be able to scrape the literature and tell me what's the best antibiotic in that moment for that patient, and I'm going to have that as an additional input to my decision making, that's a great thing for patients. And I think it's a great thing to improve quality of care, to reduce variability. So just as we look into the forward, I do see AI as becoming more of a part of the medical team. And not to be too kitschy, but doctor still is the quarterback. But the AI is going to be increasingly important as an additional information input and efficiency gainer.
And I do want to touch on the two other areas that sadly may not make as much money in the short term, but you guys have done pretty well in the consumer business. One is, you guys acquired Fitbit. What role as a doctor do you see some of these non-FDA cleared consumer tools having, sort of, and I used to ask James this. I remember he was my first interview after the pandemic. James Park, then the CEO of Fitbit, and we were out at right around the corner at Salesforce Transit Park up there. We were talking, and I was like skeptical that counting steps was going to get us to a big health increase. What is your view on sort of the consumer tracking and the consumer health and the role it plays in broader health?
It's the reason that I'm actually at Google. Having so many experiences throughout my life where I've talked with my patients. I'm an internist, so I have patients who had chronic disease like diabetes or hypertension, et cetera. And I remember, especially when I was a baby doctor, and I'd say, well, here's the diet, and here's the exercise thing, here's the plan. And they would just look at me, and over time, as I built more trust with them, they would say, Doc, I know what I got to do, but I live in a neighborhood that's not safe. I have no healthy food that I can buy in my neighborhood. I took care of people in New Orleans that were uninsured and from communities of color and just didn't have a lot of resources in community. So I think beginning in that part of my journey and then across work I did in public health and other ways in my career, I just really believe that a lot of the way technology has thought about facilitating health has been to facilitate what happens in healthcare in that environment and to help the doctors often with what they're going to do. Whereas the patients on their health journey every day, all the time, not just the 1% of the time that they're there with the doctor. So the more that we can do as a company to help people on that health journey when they're wanting to learn about a condition, wanting to learn from a trusted messenger on say YouTube. But now the potential of what we're going to be able to do, creating personal large language models for people on their devices to help them have insights to a degree that I don't think we could have imagined a year ago. So now it's not just, I know how many steps I took, but I know what else was going on in my life that day when I took fewer steps or when my sleep wasn't great at night. What were the things what are the patterns that the personal LLM is going to be able to see to help me self-manage and engage with my physician when that makes sense. But I just, this notion that we can help people stay out of the healthcare system as much as possible is really important to me and to us. And we want to be on that. We want to be doing everything we can on that journey with them. And there's data around that, you know.
So we're almost out of time. I want to give you a chance
31
to
seconds.
give the audience an exciting prediction of something that you see coming down the pipeline. A year or two, what is one area where AI will have fundamentally changed healthcare for the folks in this room and watching on the live stream?
Look, I mean, I think for the first time, I think everybody on the planet is going to have the very best doctor, best quality of care. It's going to be affordable based on their price point, and it's going to know them and know their health. That's not going to happen next year, but we're on a path to getting there, and all the steps, whether that's a personal LLM in your device or ways that we're helping enterprises start to create that kind of model, we're on that pathway. And that's a world I want to live in. Where
and that AI doctor will be in network too, right?
It'll I'm not going to tackle that one.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Karen DeSalvo.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And now it's our Axios business and technology reporter, Kia Kokolacheva.
Glad to be back in San Francisco with our BFD event. We're going to keep the AI conversation going with a last-minute addition to our lineup. Our next CEO runs a company that's been making a lot of headlines for wanting to give us better search on the internet. Please welcome to the stage co-founder and CEO of Perplexity, Arvind Srinivas. Thank you so much. Okay. We're going to start with a little bit of audience participation to wake you guys up. Raise your hand if you use Perplexity. Okay. Raise your hand if you use a paid version of Perplexity. Okay, all right, not bad. Which is not surprising because Perplexity has at least 10 million monthly users. Is that still your current figure? Do you want to give us an update?
Not here, but certainly grown. And whoever is not paying for it, please pay for it. But yeah, like the interesting part of the product is you can use it for free and it still works pretty well. And our goal is not to give you a really bad product for the free version and paywall everything that's good. Our goal is that we work hard on reducing the cost of the technology so that the free version works as well as the paid version, and the paid version is always staying a step ahead in terms of the frontier models.
So before we dig a little deeper, I'd love for you to just give us a very quick explanation of what exactly you guys built, because you're not quite like the other companies that have built a full large language model from the start.
Yeah, so there's a scene in the Steve Jobs movie where Kate Winslet's also an actor in it, where there's a scene between Wozniak and Jobs, and Wozniak asks Jobs, you're not the designer, you're not the engineer, you don't write code, you don't actually come up with a design, but people know you, and why is that? And Steve Jobs says, it's because I play the orchestra. There is a term in AI called orchestration. You take a model, you take a bunch of tools like calculators, search engines, Wolfram Alpha, Python code environments, and different proprietary data sources, web data, other forms of internal data, external data, and build one unified product and a platform where you can go and ask questions and trust the answers, because the answers are as accurate as possible, and also reference the sources so that you can go dig deeper in case you don't really trust the answer to. So that requires you to play the orchestra between all these tools at once and make sure the user experience is super fast, reliable, can scale, and keeps improving with a good, delightful UI. That's what we do. And it's pretty hard to get all of these things right at the same time. It's easy to be good at one part of it. Like you can always be extremely accurate, but you can be a slow product. You can just throw the largest model, or you can be really fast, but be much poorer in terms of accuracy. It's very hard to have both and a good design and all these other elements working together well.
Okay, so the big narrative about Perplexity so far is that you guys are taking on Google Search and Google's Gemini. Is that what you're competing against?
So we're not like trying to take market share from search engines. In fact, I believe we are spearheading the future where search is no longer 10 blue links. Instead, you can directly go and ask a question and get answers. So you're going to be able to do more with less. We do not ever need to serve like, I think Google serves like 3 to 5 billion queries a day. We do not ever need to serve that volume like in future. Instead, like we should help people get more done with just like a single query. So that is possible when you build an answer engine. Like you just go and ask a question and get an answer. And we are glad that like existing search engines are also trying to adopt that. Existing chatbots are also trying to adopt that. So that shows that this is like a new segment where more and more people learn how to use it, and it's going to create new business models around it, and like a lot of revenue and profits are going to be generated in this sector. And in that sector, our belief and like what we're working towards is not necessarily a monopoly, winner takes it all situation there. And a good chunk of those profits can be shared. And even a startup can be a player there. And like because we started very early, like we hope to be a big player in that market.
So Google actually had a big event this morning, Google I/O. They announced a lot of new features and products, including one that summarizes some of the search results.
Right.
It sounds like you are all kind of converging towards the same place. Does that concern you?
No, not at all. I mean, look, whatever they announced today is just a reworded version of what they announced 1 year ago. 1 year ago, it was called Search Generative Experience. Today, it's called AI Overview. I bet you next year it's going to be called something else. So it's exactly the same story of them building a new messaging app every year. And this is why you need to be focused. And this means the world to you, basically. For them, an answer engine or an answer bot is not the primary focus. In fact, in a world where everybody just gets answers and doesn't have to browse and click on links, the biggest loser is Google, because they hurt their relationships with publishers. They're not giving them traffic anymore. They hurt their relationship with advertisers. They're not giving as many clicks anymore. The cost per click will reduce. The cost per query for Google will increase. It just strictly becomes a lower margin business at such a massive scale. So it's less about announcing that we're going to roll it out and more about actually rolling it out and using it for every single query, especially commercially intended queries where like there's literally no incentive for you to like get accurate answers there. So I think that's where we hope to have the classic innovator dilemma benefit. Whereas a startup with no existing business model to protect, we can be more aggressive on these kind of query categories compared to Google.
But isn't that also kind of applying to Perplexity? Because if I go on your app and I ask a question to find out information, I'm now going to you instead of going to maybe the website that I would have gone to originally. And now that website might be upset that I'm not giving it traffic.
So we were the first to do citations for every answer. Earlier, if you looked at ChatGPT, it would never cite its sources, make up sources. So from that perspective, we're already like giving you a lot of credit in case we take your content. By the way, even journalists, when you write articles, sometimes you do cite someone else who broke the story for the first time, right? That's exactly what we are doing. So it's the same mechanism here. And for people who are interested to hear what the first story said, they're going to click on that link and read it anyway. And for people who are not interested to dig deeper, they already got the essence of it, and they also got very clear messaging that it came from this particular person. So that's purpose solved. Like your purpose is that people should read what you wrote and people should know that it came from you. That's achieved not just through like actually getting onto your website, but can also be achieved through citations.
Speaking of content, especially journalistic content, there's been a lot of battles around copyrighted content. Media companies have been trying to ink deals or even sue AI companies. Does that affect you?
Like I said, like citations is fair use. You know, the primary difference between us and Google or OpenAI is when Google and OpenAI scrape your web page, they're training their next generation foundation models on your tokens, on the data. So all your writing skills, your talents are being absorbed by the models that they're building, like GPT-4 or Gemini 2 or Gemini 1. Like these models are like distilling the skills that you have, and they're trying to replace you. On the other hand, Perplexity is different. Perplexity is here to serve as a knowledge engine. So it only works well if you continue to create new knowledge. Only then there is a value in our product. We are basically resurfacing the content back into the user with a more efficient interface than Blue Links, but it's still like a search engine. So our models that we train are only trained to like be good at summarization. We're not actually training our models on your tokens. We're only training models to be good at certain skills, like making sure you can chat, making sure you can summarize, making sure you can reference appropriately, and then making sure that you don't hallucinate if you have conflicting information. So that way we're not like stealing your content. We're actually like helping users discover your content more efficiently.
But you're still training it on some kind of data. Is it just very specific type of data?
Yeah, it's more like skills, like, oh, like given this paragraph, try to summarize it in the form of like an answer which is well formatted, appropriately cites at the end of every sentence. So you're like teaching the AI to always give credit to where the content is coming from. So it's not actually training on like your tokens that you actually write in the publisher website, whereas OpenAI and Google do that, and that's the primary difference between us and them.
Got it. Let's talk about business model. So you guys started out with having a paid tier. Now you even have a enterprise paid version.
Yeah.
But you're also looking at doing ads.
Yeah.
Tell me about the thinking behind adding that.
Yeah, so our belief is that advertisements should never come at the cost of serving a correct answer. I think the one thing that Google got wrong is that the same unit of information that stands for truth, which is the links, is also the same unit of information that the advertiser bids on. So that's when there's a conflict between like serving the user and serving the advertiser. In Perplexity, we do not intend to create ad units around the links or the answer or bias the answer to say stuff that you want users to read about your brand or things like that. Instead, we plan to advertise around like other units of information. Like we always suggest related questions at the end of every answer. So we could the advertiser could influence the user to like reading more about them on a query that the user asks that's relevant to them. Or we have a discover page that has like everyday news or interesting content on the web, and people could bid to be on the user's timeline for that day. So there are other ways to do advertisement in a much lower margin way than what Google does. And having a diversified business around subscriptions and advertisements reduces the need for going really all in on ads and at the cost of keeping the answer engine accurate and minimally not a lot of clutter. So it helps us to have that flexibility, and that's the luxury that business models like Netflix or Spotify enjoy.
Since we have a lot of Perplexity users in the audience, when can they expect to see ads?
I mean, I don't have a precise timeline, but we definitely are going to start trying experiments this year.
And then bigger picture on your business model, how are you thinking about your goal in terms of paid users versus enterprise users versus free users?
Yeah, I think like the Enterprise Pro is basically like gonna do much harder, complex queries that you require for your work. Like, hey, like do me the research of my competitors and pull out the latest news. Or like I'm meeting a bunch of people from this company and I want all the up-to-date information about them in order to tune my pitch for them. Like those kind of queries where the value of an answer is so high that paying a lot for such a product makes a lot of sense. and it benefits all employees, not just like one particular workforce. I think that's where like an Enterprise Pro will excel at, and web research is just a starting point. Like we plan to also support internal search use cases, and like proprietary data, like financial data and things like that. So it'll be a pretty separate product from what the average consumer uses. But I don't, in a future where AIs are going to be so capable, I don't really see a lot of difference between high net worth individuals and enterprises. You're basically going to pay for the result. So if you have a lot of money, like if you ever listen to Stan Druckenmiller's interview, he was watching Davos, and like everybody was talking about investing in Argentina, and then he goes to Perplexity and asks for the liquid ADRs that he can invest in that will count as an Argentinian investment. And then he got the answer and just immediately did the investments and read more about them again on Perplexity. So the value of that answer is pretty high. If you made a good investment through knowledge you acquired from Perplexity, and that investment returned you like say tens of millions of dollars, $20 a month sounds like too cheap for such a product, right? So I think like as AIs get more capable and it can answer really hard questions like, what should I be even investing in, or how do I invest in Argentina, where it teaches you what ADRs are and things like that. I think people with a lot of money who think they clearly get a lot of benefit from it would be willing to pay a lot more. So we would see such bifurcation even in the subscription tiers, where there's going to be a really big tier, most capable models, like very expensive. Latency is not like few seconds, but the answer is so good, so they'll pay a lot for it. And most of the people who pay for or may not even pay for a product, and it'll work pretty fine for like 80 to 90% of facts and trivia and like regular knowledge. And that product might be more monetized through advertisements.
Okay, so do you think that eventually the average internet consumer out there will be using a free version?
I think so, but I also think that everybody wants, like in a world where AIs are so capable that like solopreneurs or like people with just like a good amount of salary who wants to spend a bit on these AIs and become richer by making their own like investments and things like that, the boundaries get blurred between who's an enterprise and who's an individual.
Okay. I look forward to using my very powerful free AI down the line. Shifting gears a little bit, so funding, you guys have raised several rounds of funding at this point. You just announced $62 million a few weeks ago, but there's also rumors that you're raising more than $250 million at like upwards to $3 billion valuation. Anything you can tell us about this?
I didn't hear about it. Like, where do you read it?
It was in a TechCrunch story, but that's okay. But zooming out though, it feels like all of the companies, all the AI companies are constantly raising new rounds. Like OpenAI has raised billions. Anthropic is raising more. X.AI, Elon Musk's AI company, is trying to raise $6 billion. Is that just the name of the game? Do you all just need to keep raising money to chase each other?
It feels like that to me.
Okay.
And unfortunate, but basically this is how it works. When you're trying to, in order to build AI, you need to like hire really smart people. There are very few people who really understand even prompt engineering, making these models do what you want them to do, making it do it reliably at scale. And then the other part of just even training these models and continually improving them, collecting data, doing evals, and like setting up the pipeline to do this automatically. This requires a lot of like tacit knowledge that doesn't exist in the wide engineering community right now. It's not yet commoditized. So these people are expensive, and their salaries all got inflated because OpenAI started paying them a lot, and not pay them through equity when they used to be valued at like 15 to 20 billion. But now that they're valued more close to 100 billion, their salaries are all like 5x, 6x what they used to be. But now that becomes their market value. And now like when other companies try to compete with OpenAI for talent, they're also willing to pay that much.
So do you have to play that game?
I try not to at least go for talent that wants to work at earlier stage companies and not like just optimizing for money. But in general, like at some point, like you do need to hire very good talented people. and there are only few of them, and like all these companies go for such people. So that's why you do need to raise more money to pay people really well, or to have a high enough valuation that like you don't need to dilute your entire option pool just to hire like 1 or 2 people. So this is just like why, and there's the other argument of like, building a big cluster, and so GPUs are expensive, so you got to go and spend it on cloud. And if you looked at the article that was written just a few hours ago, out of the $6 billion Musk is raising, he's already committing to spend $10 billion on Oracle. Like he's committing more than the amount he's even raising.
Right.
That's a trend in AI companies. Like there are many startups where they raised 70 million, but they committed like 300 million.
Yeah, those chips are expensive. My last question to you is that last fall we had 2 of the co-founders of Inflection AI on our stage. They talked about wanting to build a publicly traded $100 billion company, and then they sold a few months later.
Famous last words.
Yeah, to
Microsoft.
Microsoft.
I hope we can continue building even next year, now that I'm on the stage right now. But so I'm definitely not going to say like we're going to go public.
Okay, all right, you heard it here first, you guys. Thank you so much for sticking around. We'll have some more talks.
Please give a warm welcome to the stage our View from the Top moderator, Axios publisher, Nicholas Johnston.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. I love Axios events. They are the live manifestation of our journalism. It's great to be here in the real world, seeing we have actual readers. It's great for our readers to see our actual journalists and spend time to connect together. So thank you all so much for being here. And also a huge thanks to our partners for making these events possible. Latham & Watkins has been a partner for Axios for 3 years, since the very beginning of BFD. None of this would exist without their support. And so I'm very excited to welcome to the stage for a View from the Top conversation, Latham partner and chair of the firm's technology industry group and Bay Area corporate department, Rick Klein. Rick, welcome to the Axios stage. How are you? Doing great. So we have been having, with you and your colleagues, I feel like a multi-year rolling conversation about the state of the market, when it goes up, when it goes down, what's coming next. So like, give us the latest update. How are things?
I think the latest is we're in a positive transition, right? 2021, everybody was going public at incredible valuations that probably weren't sustainable for a lot of companies. 22 and 23, I think the market was kind of absorbing it, and now
that was that little.
Yeah, now I think we're starting to turn back up. I think 24, we've seen some deals that have performed really well. I think we'll see some more, and I think we're setting up for a really good 25.
I'm going to get into specifics in a second, but something that we've come up a little bit before is like that sense of momentum, right? Like whether a dam breaks or whether those first firms go out and you see the start to movement. It sounds like this is like the most sense of optimism I've heard about that. Is like, yes, that there's a sense of momentum in the market for that.
I think it is, but I think when you talk to a lot of companies, they're more optimistic, but they're still talking about 25.
Right.
And so there is more optimism, but I don't think the dam, I do think the dam will break, but I don't think it'll be this year.
It's almost like that light at the end of the tunnel is getting closer, and it's not an oncoming train, it's the end of the tunnel.
I think that's right.
You were involved, you and your firm advised on 2 IPOs this year, Reddit and Rubrik. Like, tell me what that experience was like. Like, what was it? What did you learn? What was it? Was it similar to pre-year ones? How was it different?
So they were slightly longer processes than in the past, right? They both took a little while just because working through to access the market at the right times. They're both great companies. They're both really sizable companies, and I think that's something that we're seeing, that the market at that stage is much more comfortable with kind of durable growth, as opposed to some of the earlier stage companies that were going public in 21, where growth rates sometimes were decelerating your first few quarters as a public.
Is this part of the evolution you're seeing in the market, where it still takes a little longer than it used to take, and you're looking at a different stage or different companies on a different place in the trajectory?
It is. I think it's a temporary. I don't believe you will have to be this large to get public in the next year or two. But I think right now, as we're transitioning into the more optimistic, it's just easier for some of these larger, more well-known names to access the.
I mean, I feel like it's natural that in this you'd expect for the first ones that kind of chart that path, they would be larger, more established. It would take a little bit longer.
Exactly, and you're seeing a few smaller companies. You know, Astera Labs went out, Ibotta went out, but I think the ones that are really getting the attention are the larger, more established names.
Is that expectation then? You feel like it gets back to normal? And what is normal? Like, what does that trend line go back to? And I want to get a little bit more to get you thinking future in a second.
Yeah, it's interesting. So it always makes me feel old when I say this, but I've been doing this now for 25 years. I'm not sure there's ever a normal. It would be nice if there was a normal where the exact right companies at the right sizes went public, but everybody's guessing what's the market today, what's it going to be next quarter. And so I'm not sure there's a normal. I think right now we're a little bit kind of suboptimal from normal, where I do think you have to be a little bit larger to have confidence. I do think in the next year, you're going to see companies with a few $100 million in ARR growing 30 to 40%. Like, to me, when those companies are going out and having good results for their IPO and as a public company, that's a good normal.
That suboptimal range you're talking about is really kind of company stage and size.
Feeling that you have to be older, more mature, and larger to get public. I feel like that's suboptimal because at that stage, a lot of the growth of the company has happened and the private investors got to enjoy that. I think it's really optimal for the IPO market when companies will go out a little bit earlier so the public investors can enjoy a lot of it.
They're missing out then on that. Well, then, like,
in a lot of ways.
Like, I want to dig into that a little bit. Like, who are we convincing about that to sort of move that needle? Like, what are the outside forces that are involved there? That is, you're talking to folks in these companies.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's management teams and boards of just the confidence. You only get to, I mean, it's, initial. You only get to IPO once. And
so get it right.
You want to get it right. And so I think it's management teams and boards having the confidence. Some of what happened in 22 and 23, as there was market disruption, a lot of tech companies sell to other tech companies. So the ability to be confident in your customers when your customers were going through that disruption was really impacted. I think there's a feeling that's really stabilized now. And so that's where I think a lot of the optimism is coming, that boards and management teams will feel much better.
And so that fits into, it's not just an IPO sentiment, that's just like a broader business sentiment. Like, how are my competitors doing? How are my customers doing? What's my order book look like? That gives me the confidence to go approach public.
100%. And for the companies that are thinking about the IPO, where you only get to do it once, you really want to have that confidence. If you're already public, you're getting judged every quarter. Right. But that's exactly right. That confidence, I think, is growing.
Let's spin this forward. Like, let's look ahead. Like, how are you looking at the next 6 months? If we have this conversation again, we're back in a year. Like, what are you keeping an eye on? How do you think that conversation will go?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of there will be more in the next 6 months. There will be more deals, and we may, in about 6 months from now, we may have an election coming up, and that sometimes spooks people. I really think 12 months from now, we'll be talking about the dam breaking, many more companies, some huge names that everybody talks about, and some earlier stage companies that are accessing the public markets, whether they're AI companies or have a great AI story.
Is this even a little bit like we've been at this sort of spot for so long? The backlog has built up so much where it's like it's got to give, and so we're reaching I feel like a combination of, like, both the macroeconomic conditions are getting better, and there's just so many companies that are going to be so great. It's time.
Totally. Yeah. I think those of us who do this for a living and love, I'm a deal junkie. I love doing this. I'm ready for the damn.
You're getting excited.
12 months from now, I'll be sitting
I feel the mood.
I'll tell you I'm exhausted and I need a break, but yeah, I think that's what's coming.
All right, before we get the hook here, let's end on one fun thing. I love talking to lawyers. Lawyers have great lawyer stories. Great client stories. As a deal maker, someone who loves deals, like, tell us a good story about a deal you've been on that was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, the last few years you saw direct listings, you saw SPACs. If you rewind kind of 15 to 20 years ago, there were things called Dutch auctions that were happening, and NetSuite used a Dutch auction to go public. So the roadshow, now it's like a week, maybe 8 or 9 days. Used to be a week and a half. About the middle of the roadshow, because it was a Dutch auction, they had full visibility into the order book. And so the management team told us every afternoon, go to the printer and we'll call and tell you what happens. And so they were out on the roadshow, I think the range started at $14 to $16, and they would go out and tell investors, that range is going up. They'd call us in the afternoon. They would say, okay, we got very positive feedback today. Let's change it from 14 to 16 to 16 to 18.
Let's do this in real time
The next day
while
it
we're out
was
on the road.
18 to 20. And every day an investor saw the range go up, it was like a chicken and an egg. It caused more investor excitement. They ended up pricing at 26, trading up to, I think it was 39 on the first day. If you had asked me, this was 2007, how many more Dutch auctions are you going to do in your career? I would have said a ton. And there really haven't been any since then. It'd just be interesting. I mean, I thought that was it was a trend that I thought would develop.
Why not? Like, what stopped it?
So there were some IP issues around one of the investment
Okay,
banks there. So W.R. Hambrecht was a bank that had a patent on it. That may literally have been, I think, what
Was it
stopped
not a pain in the butt to have to be repricing and thinking about this every day?
It was a really interesting. They went out right before Christmas, so it was basically my December of 2007. I lived at the printer every night. At the end of every night when we would refile, I would leave a message for the SEC. You're going to see a new range tomorrow. I'd wake up at 6 or 7 in the morning to have the call with the SEC to explain to them, no, it's a real bona fide range and all the impacts that has. It was an interesting.
You enjoyed it?
I'm a deal junkie.
All right, so if there are any startups who are contemplating going public the next year and you want to do a Dutch auction, here's your lawyer.
Love it.
To call. Might be the only one in town who would be excited about that. Rick, thanks so much for being here, sharing your insights. Huge thanks to Latham & Watkins for being a partner for 3 years. We're at the halfway point. We got a quick 20-minute break. Go grab a snack. Go use the restroom. We'll be back on stage shortly. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Nick. That was fun.
Axios BFD San Francisco will resume in just a moment. Axios BFD San Francisco will resume in just a moment.
Deals and dealmakers
buzzes with activity.
Axios Pro Deals is here to break through the noise and keep you steps ahead.
Want to know who got funded today?
We've got you covered. We've got you covered.
We've got you covered.
Looking for your next smart investment?
We'll navigate you there.
Interested in deep, exclusive analysis on what's under the surface?
We're your source. Axios Pro Deals brings you expertise on venture capital, private equity, and M&A in 5 critical sectors:
FinTech,
health tech,
Retail,
media, and climate.
Consider us the go-to toolkit for modern deal makers.
Because making smarter decisions, investments, and connections starts here.
Whether you're a venture capitalist,
Private equity manager,
Investor,
founder,
banker, or regulator, Axios Pro Deals is your ticket to elevating your deal-making game.
know first,
Know faster.
know what matters.
Returning to the stage, Kia Kokolacheva.
folks, get back to your seats. We're going to resume. Also, big thank you to our studio team for this awesome video. That was really, really cool. And if you're not subscribed to Pro yet, go to our website and check it out. Also, a quick reminder, we'll be having a reception at 5 p.m., but before that, we'll have a few more really, really interesting conversations, so stick around. Our next guest is running a company that's been on the internet for a very long time. So we're going to talk about M&A, going public again, and also how it's keeping up with the internet times. Please welcome to the stage the CEO of Yahoo, Jim Lanzone. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
No, thank you for making it.
I held a Christmas party here one year, holiday party.
Very cool. Great venue. We're going to start with the big topic of the day, AI. So it seems like all the media companies out there are either striking some deals with AI companies or they're suing them. What is Yahoo's approach?
Well, Yahoo's a little different in that the majority of our products are aggregators. We're actually partnering with thousands of content creators. So we're actually in a unique position. We do a lot of first-party content that we create. We just had President Biden on today for an exclusive on Yahoo Finance about the tariffs.
Yeah.
So we do, but for us, we start with aggregation, and then, really our first-party content is for context that we provide around it, whether that's sports. Our old friend Kendall Baker from Axios, who's with us now at Yahoo Sports, and things like that. So, our thoughts about licensing our content are it's not as top of mind as for others.
Why not?
Because we're the vast majority of the content you're going to get on Yahoo is actually aggregated from other sources, right? So they're largely they're the ones in the middle of that fight.
But you guys have been rolling out some AI capabilities into some of the Yahoo products. Yep. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's if you go back to the core Yahoo products, and again, you talked about before I got on how long it's been around. It's true, and people are surprised to hear and find out that we are still top 5 in traffic every month. We touch 87% of all U.S. internet users. We're still number 1 or number 2 in categories like finance, sports, email, number 1 in news. And if you think about from an AI point of view, we're not competing to build our own foundational model or anything like that. We're integrating AI in every one of those products to make them better. So in mail, we launched a year ago the ability to summarize, search better, help edit, all those things. In sports, it's everything from helping set your lineup in fantasy, we're really big, to helping write smack-talking emails to your competitors using AI, which is, some of the headlines are pretty funny, helping with your stock portfolio. So we actually, and by the way, on the back end, obviously things like customer service and things on the productivity side. So AI is, we're doing a lot with it all over the company, maybe in a different way than others.
Are you building that tech by yourself, or are you using APIs or other tools?
We're partners with a lot. We have a very significant partnership with Microsoft, but we also have partnerships with OpenAI, Google, and others.
In terms of content and AI, obviously you mentioned most of it is from other sources, but you do have your own newsroom and first-party content. Do you think about what's defensible, or what, in the future when AI is doing a lot of the commodity type of content, what can Yahoo still do itself?
For sure. I mean, I think when you get to that point, I think what will be scarce will be trust, which we have with our users, in what's trustworthy to read and what's really valid, what's just clickbait, or a fake outrage generator. I mean, they're out there, and I think the trust factor is going to get more and more at a premium, and it's shame on us if we don't take advantage of that to provide that to our users. We do have some things in the workshop right now, especially as we look out towards the election coming up, and just how much is going to be thrown at that in terms of fake content and again things to generate outrage, and all these things are going to happen. We bought a company last summer called The Factual, which actually categorizes news stories, rates them based on their accuracy, on their left or right leaning bias. So that's been integrated into the back end of our algorithms. And then obviously we just bought Artifact, and that'll be part of the next round of what we're launching.
We're going to get back to Artifact in a minute because everybody wants to know about the Instagram guys news. Search is another thing you've hinted last year that you might get back into. Any updates? What's the status of that?
Yeah, I think so. I have a long background in search, and I do think some of my old cronies in that industry read into some comments at conferences that some of my team made. I mean, I don't think that. I mean, if you take one other step back, we spun out of Verizon in September of 2021 after having been a public company or part of a public company for almost 26 years by that point. Clearly, not everything was firing on all cylinders during all of that time. So we inherited some amazing assets, but job number one was to get to work in improving those assets and improving those products. So jumping headfirst into competing in web search was not the first thing on the agenda. I do always think, especially because I ran a smaller search engine right in the heart of the rise of Google, that there are always places to innovate. There's always things you can do to help your user base, and we are the third-ranked search engine in the United States. We already have a bunch of people doing queries with us that we can make better. And so again, back to the workshop, because right now we've been cooking. We've been in every one of our categories. So we do have some things coming to market, but I would say they're much more about helping make the searches we already get better and helping people be more successful with those. And we think there's some innovative things to do, but it's still early.
Speaking of cooking, is your souffle rising? How is that going? How's the business going?
I was wondering, like, that metaphor. Are you a big fan of The Bear?
Great show.
Same. So so we've been making every second count. we really, look, the core of Yahoo is a very strong underlying business. Our ads business is really strong. We had some pretty obvious things that we thought that we could do that affected the cost side. There were strategic moves. We got out of two ad tech businesses, our supply side platform and our native ads business that required us to eliminate a couple of very large divisions. But our business is extremely healthy financially, which allows you to then focus on what is the most important thing we could possibly be doing right now, which is improving our products. So everybody at Yahoo has been spending the last however many cycles in the lab working on brand new versions of every product that we have. When you think about the long-term viability of any major consumer internet company, whether you're 29 years old or 1 year old, it starts with the health of your customer base, your consumer side base. You can only monetize that if that's really healthy. So we start there. But again, we're one of the largest ad sales forces on the internet. We make a lot of revenue in web search and other areas. So very healthy on that side of things. But it's been great to be able to focus on innovation again, and that's where we've been focused.
The ad business, the changes you just mentioned, has that worked out how you expected it? Is your ad business healthier now?
So there are two ad businesses. So one is our owned and operated properties like finance and sports and others. So those are sold directly, and so those are healthy in their own right. The ad tech business, which if you go way back, I don't know how many people know, but we also own AOL. That was also bought by Verizon. So when we spun out as the new Yahoo, we also own AOL. And those two companies bought at least 30 different ad tech businesses over a 15-year period. So really our job was to streamline those and the things that were really viable going forward. And the thing that we were best at was our demand side platform, our DSP. And this last quarter, as a result of these changes, was the first time in, I think, 15 years that we were able to focus exclusively on the DSP for product development. It's always had to, have those resources peanut buttered across a lot of different divisions. It's going very well on that side of things. So we compete against the Trade Desk and others in that space, and I think we're we're starting to make ourselves, known in that space. I think we're annoying some people with how well we're starting to do.
So it's going well. Is it profitable yet? That business?
On individual basis, it's not quite profitable yet, but much more profitable than it was. Yeah.
That's good news for
Yeah.
you. Let's talk about bigger future for Yahoo. Obviously, used to be publicly traded, currently owned by PE. What's the plan to go public again?
Well, so that would presume that's the only plan.
Oh.
I would say, look, my experience from having done this for a long time is no matter what that outcome is, if it's an IPO, if we're bought, if we are just around for a long time, like giving out dividends, whatever that looks like, really it starts with how is this going to be a successful business for the next 30 years, right? And again, what's been, it's after having been public for so long, the ability to improve this business as a private company again, making investments as we see fit, and really improving the operations of the company, changing out the team. We've changed out the structure of everything. It's been a lot of change, especially in that first year. It was still COVID. So I don't think we need to think that far ahead yet. I think we have to think about growth and sustainable growth, not not thinking short term about that. But that's what all these investments have been about. I think if we do that, then good things happen, obviously, in this industry, no matter what. But it's one of a kind in terms of an asset that's this large, that's this financially successful, that's been around this long, and kind of gets another second chance to go back and do things right. And look, we don't have the burden that I think past Yahoo management teams had of trying to make up for sins of the past. So losing search in the early 2000s, there were a lot of different things that were tried that were, in some ways never going to have a chance. We now, how we've come back into the world, it's a much more simpler task of focusing on Yahoo Sports, focusing on Yahoo Finance, Yahoo Mail, making those great, like making the improvements that I think are long overdue to those products, and not having to worry about those existential problems that I think past teams were kind of stuck with.
But is there any sort of timeline that you and Apollo are thinking about, like even a check-in, like in X number of years, we need to see where we're at and then decide what's next? Like,
I mean, again, I've run big internet companies. I've also run startups. Had people like Bill Gurley on my board of my startup. You always have those timelines with investors. They could be VCs. It could be when I worked for Barry Diller or others. I mean, it's always, the pressure is always going to be on that way. I don't think there's any anything unique here, just because we have a lot of runway with the business itself. Being really healthy. So I'm sure in the PE world there are timelines, but I don't think that I was brought in to be the one to worry about those. I think we're super motivated to make every second count, to be doing this as fast as we can to make these products better, and good things are going to come from that.
that is such a great place to be as someone owned by PE. Let's talk about M&A. So you guys bought Artifact, which was a news app that was started by the Instagram founders, and then you guys bought it in April, I believe. Why? What are you going to do with that?
So let's start here. Yahoo News is the #1 by traffic news product on the internet. We do aggregation, and when Artifact hit, I was a huge fan right away. I don't know whether you were, but I think a lot of people here were. I loved how that product worked. I thought it was really smart, and I was a little scared of it at first, and what it could do. And I understood then when I saw that Kevin wrote the blog post saying that they were going to be shutting it down. A lot of the reasons were ones that we actually could have been helpful with, which was we have scale. We already have that audience. That's really hard to get. It's hard to light the wet log of traffic and get that going for any business, no matter how cool the product is. And if you think about it, the number of businesses on the internet that break through with true scaled traffic, I mean, 1 every 2, 3, 4 years. I mean, it's not that often, so it's hard to do. So when I saw that, I reached out to Kevin and asked him what they were going to do with it, and then it turned out that I wasn't the only one. And so that started a bit of a negotiation. But what Kevin and Mike, I think, saw in us was the ability for this product that they were really proud of to live on, to find that audience, and a team that really respected them and wanted to work with them on it. So actually, the way we did the deal, they're actually advisors to us. They're in the workshop with our team, helping us integrate it and build out what's going to wind up being a brand new product that's really a combination of the two, of what we were building and what Artifact was, but when it launches. So we're super excited about it. It's looking great. The teams have worked together incredibly well. For what was a pretty small deal, I think it can have a huge impact.
When is this launching? I'm excited now.
Not that far. I can't give an actual date, but not too far. It's not going to be too far out.
So you guys have actually acquired other sort of smaller companies in a similar vein.
Yeah.
Is that your acquisition strategy?
I think there are 2 acquisition strategies. We've only publicly executed on one of them, which is on the one hand, I think we've done 4 now, so let's call it 2 per year, but it could have been more, could have been less, where it bolsters our product, either the actual product or the technology behind it. They haven't been acqui-hires. They've actually been ones where we say, we need that, and that would accelerate our roadmap, and let's get that in here. The other would have been, and we've kicked the tires on some of these, we just haven't found the right deal yet, that could expand our footprint into either new categories where we think we have a right to play. But those are just harder, right? The value, the price to health of the business, that's an evolving situation in Silicon Valley. So we haven't found the right deal there yet, but our eyes are open for what that could be.
So you could buy a whole company that becomes kind of a subsidiary or
100%.
Okay,
We could have done it by now.
Okay.
It just didn't. We didn't find the right deal at the right price yet. But we've been actively a part of a few.
At least you're working on it.
Yeah, we are.
Maybe next year we'll talk about that.
Yep.
Let's shift gears in a very different direction. So obviously, I want to ask you about the Paramount deal. Apollo, which owns Yahoo, is in the running to potentially acquire that. And Paramount includes CBS, which you used to be an executive at. So you have a very unique perspective, and I really want to hear what you think about. In
fact, on that wall was a CBS interactive donut wall made out of donuts at the Christmas party. Right over there.
Best place to talk about it.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, here's what I'll just say. Categorically, I'm not a part of any of that. So it would be, I don't want to be boring about it, but I'd be making news out of nowhere to say that I have any information about that. I have none. I just think that we built some amazing assets over time there. I was there almost 9 years that we were super proud of. And I do think that there's a lot of value to those assets, whoever does wind up with them, or if they stay on their own. But I don't have any inside information on it.
But do you have an opinion on what would be the best place for CBS? Should it be by itself?
I don't think that that's even possible to know that, at this point that CBS, it's part of a conglomerate now. So I don't know that spinning on its own is an option.
But should a big company own something like CBS, which has a broadcasting license?
I think all of its competitors are pretty much owned by, in a conglomerate fashion. When we were a standalone company, we were the only ones not to be. So theoretically, I think it probably does make sense to be part of a larger group of assets.
Fair enough. Another interesting job on your resume is that Jim used to be, briefly, CEO of Tinder. And online dating is a big topic.
Don't I seem like I would have been? No?
Online dating, huge topic right now. Everyone's talking about how it intersects with AI. What is the future of AI in dating, as someone who's run one of those companies?
Well, I think this is true across the application layer. We haven't seen a lot of breakout application layer products yet, but it does seem to me that People are going to figure out the right ones that work on the relationship coaching side of things. People need that. They seem to be open to getting feedback that way. So to me, that's where that plays. Like anything that can help people, kick off the communications process better it would be helpful. I don't think having two AIs talking to each other while the real people are in the backgrounds is a great way to look at the future. It's pretty dystopian, but they always called it the hey problem in online dating. That again, I wasn't there for very long, but that the first text between two people was just hey from the guy, and they wanted more. So I do think that there's some richness there that can be brought to the table. But again, this notion that there's two AI robots while the real people are playing video games seems like hopefully not the pathway that's going down. Anything that can help real relationships in the real world happen, I think, is what I would be excited about.
Okay. Should we have relationships with AI, or is that too dystopian?
I'm not. One of the greatest things about Tinder is that it wasn't judgmental. Competitors would let people select things based on height or certain things. That was just not what the internal team at Tinder ever believed. And stats show that not only did it lead to health, more marriages or healthier marriages, but also like more interracial marriages and more gay marriages. And it was great for that side of diversity in relationships. And who knows where that could lead.
All right, my last question for you is very important to the future of Yahoo. Are you going to bring back the billboard over the freeway in San Francisco?
Who wants the billboard over the freeway?
Raise your hand if you want the billboard. I want it. Yeah? Okay.
I'll tell you this. We love our team, and I have a new CMO, Tressie Lieberman. She came from Chipotle, but we've really seen a lot in terms of people's nostalgia for the brand and for the, kind of what the more simple, more pure version of the internet, maybe represented the 90s, but definitely pre-social media represented, maybe what the founding fathers and mothers of the internet had kind of wanted. And there's something about the old Yahoo, when you go back and look at it, that's you get an interesting feeling looking at that. And I think a lot of the communications around it, the billboard, the dolphin ad, the yodel. I mean, at 49ers games now, it's still, we renewed this deal, but when the Niners score a touchdown, the entire stadium yodels the Yahoo yodel, still. And so I think, it's an interesting thing for us to think about leaning into, but not if the products aren't awesome. And that is jobs 1, 2, and 3 for us right now. It's all about product.
Okay, I'm going to cross my fingers. Billboard is job 4. All right, thank you guys so much. We've got a couple more conversations and then cocktails.
All right, thanks everybody.
Welcoming back to the stage, Dan Primack.
Wow, there's more people here now. Hello. Everybody, we have 2 more conversations. Our next guest was a prosecutor, then started to co-lead the crypto practice at Andreessen Horowitz before leaving to launch her own firm, which raised just a mere $1.5 billion for their debut funds. Please welcome Katie Haun.
Hey, Dan. Thanks for having me.
All right, Katie, so I'm gonna give you a scenario here. You haven't met them, but you're at dinner with my parents, who are in their 70s, and they say, Katie, what's crypto? They do have email addresses, but that's kind of the end of it. How do you describe it?
So how we describe it, first of all, we get away from the currency piece right away. We talk about crypto really is cryptography paired with economic incentives. And we talk about how, eyeballs on screens are up and to the right, and how in this new world, you would really want to own things that are actually scarce.
There's obviously a reputation, a long reputation, and you were a prosecutor that prosecuted crimes that utilized crypto. For those who say crypto is best, it is the most effective tool for crooks, or that's its primary application or its best application, you say what?
I say I hope crooks keep using technologies like that, because the truth is that technologies like blockchain provide audible, kind of immutable permanent digital breadcrumbs. And so if we want to catch folks, actually, I would far prefer that they were using, I don't say this as crypto, please don't print this as a headline of I hope criminals use it.
Han, please use this for bad.
So context here matters. But I would say I prosecuted some of the largest money laundering frauds in history, by the way, using fiat currency. But also some of those early cases in 2013, 2014, we never would have been able to solve but for the blockchain. Because then I ask bank CEOs all the time, how many bank subpoenas have you ever issued? Because I've issued over 1,000, and I'll tell you how many actually got back. By the time we get returns back from bank subpoenas, Dan, if you even get them back at all, it's not really a profit center for banks or financial institutions. By the time you get them back, often the money has moved several hops around the world. The Bank Secrecy Act and laws like this were passed in the 1970s, before kind of banking was truly global and digital. So what I say is traceability, immutability, permanence.
So you leave government, you go into the private sector, and I think for those in the crypto industry who didn't know you yet from your time in public service, they first probably get to know you when you joined the board of Coinbase, which is about 7 years ago, just prior to joining Andreessen Horowitz. You announced last month you are planning to leave the board of Coinbase when the next elections come up. Why are you stepping down?
Yeah, well, I've been on, it's true. So I had, zooming back, I was actually a murder and a gang prosecutor for most of my prosecutorial career. It was kind of late in my 12 years as a prosecutor that I got introduced to these new technologies, things like blockchain. At the time, by the way, it was only Bitcoin. Ethereum didn't even exist yet. That came on the scene in 2015. And I kind of realized pretty early on, yeah, it can be used for bad. For sure, I'll be the first to admit that. It can also be used for good, like I said, to trace. And now we have companies like Chainalysis, multi-billion-dollar businesses that have built around analytics and blockchain analytics. But getting back to Coinbase, I met Brian Armstrong. Gosh, it must have been in around 2015, I'm thinking. This is rough timing, but it was around that era. And I remember he said, well, you don't seem so horrible that you're with the government. And I said, well, you don't seem like a criminal either. What we hear about is, this is, back in those days, this criminal technology. And he said, no, I'm getting licensed in all these jurisdictions. We really want to play by the rules. And over the years, I got to know Brian. He asked me to join their board of directors, and I became their first independent director. And that was in 2017. So it's been over 7 years now, and I've seen that company through tremendous growth. I've served on 3 committees. During my time there, I've chaired some of those committees, and it's been, like I said, over 7 years. Joined the company when it was probably 150 employees. They had raised a Series B or Series C financing. They went on to raise several more rounds. They then became a public company, and I've been on 2 board terms of a publicly traded company now, and I feel like Coinbase is in a great spot right now as a business, just led by a...
One thing Brian has said about you previously, or maybe even when you're leaving, he's talked about how much your legal background has helped them. They obviously continue to be in an issue, a court case with the SEC.
Yeah, who isn't, by the way?
Okay, I'm not.
In crypto.
You?
Are you
fair
in
enough.
crypto? I said in crypto.
I'm not. I don't think I'm in trouble with the SEC.
Yeah,
I don't know. I haven't gotten a subpoena.
No.
I guess, did that give you any pause, though? Because it's obviously a big case for them. Did that give you any pause, just timing-wise, to leave the board now?
Oh, no, actually, I'll tell you, I probably would have left even earlier because it became public. It was a public company. I started my own fund. As you note, I joined the board of Coinbase before I had ever even, actually, can I tell the truth? Before I had ever even heard of Andreessen Horowitz. I'd heard of Coinbase first. And that's how I got to know Andreessen Horowitz. But it was about a year or a year and a half after I joined that board.
I'm going to ask you one last quick Coinbase question. There's a perception that how its stock trades, for better or for worse, is a decent avatar for the health of the crypto industry. Is that fair?
Well, look, there's no denying that if you put out, it doesn't kind of matter sometimes when you put up, I see investor calls or earnings calls and you think one thing, but the reality is we're still at this point where, for better or for worse, we are tied to the market cap of crypto. It seems like, because it's an N of 1, right? It's the only publicly traded, I believe it's still the only publicly traded.
Do you expect there's going to be more soon, more publicly traded crypto companies?
Define soon. I think there will be.
Within the next 12 months?
Not within the next 12 months.
Why not?
Because I think that fundamentally, we'll talk about a little bit about some of the later stage crypto companies on the scene. And I think that, first of all, it was really hard to even get a Big 4 accounting firm to audit A crypto company's financials. You know, on the one hand, the government's saying, well, you need a Big Four auditor. On the other hand, they're threatening Big Four auditors, don't be doing any business with crypto companies. So I think it was a real feat to even, and you know, Coinbase had to go through this. They got audited financial statements. That wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to get back in those days. Even banking relationships, things we take for granted now, even in the crypto industry. Getting D&O insurance, things that you would need to have if you're going to build a board and go public and do all the things that is required for kind of public governance. So my money would probably be on not in the next 12 months. I might be wrong about that. Certainly none of our portfolio has plans to go public in the next 12 months. But we're not a hedge fund. We're a venture fund, 7 to 10 years. So I think in the next couple years, we will see other companies going. Oh, actually, not an investment of ours, but Circle has filed.
That's fair. Circle has filed.
So Circle might in the next 12 months. I think the reality is, though, now we have I think it's fair to say, a pretty hostile to crypto SEC. And so SEC has to go through the S1 process. They will have to allow Circle to register. And will that happen in 12 months? I think it might with Circle.
You mentioned kind of later, so you talked about funds. It's been a little over 2 years since you raised $1.5 billion, $1 billion for a later stage fund, $500 million for an earlier stage fund. There was I think it was a Fortune story, maybe, my former shop, that put a story basically said, what happened to Katie Haun or something like that? Basically with the conceit, you were investing slowly. Was that a fair criticism?
I think we were not going through money without doing our due diligence. We were looking at the market. You know, if you look at what happened in crypto, and not just in crypto.
Because you raised prior to the FTX situation.
We raised prior to the FTX situation, yeah. And prior to the market cap dropping kind of 40%. But by the way, it did across different sectors also. Now, having been in crypto for 10 years, I know that it's very cyclical. And so also with that backdrop, I don't think, I wouldn't call it slow. I would call it measured. Frankly, I would call it responsible. And this is what our LPs expect of us. And if people want to call that slow, then we'll see, we'll be judged by our returns. Hopefully we'll be judged by our returns in 7 to 10 years and not a year later.
Where are the funds now, ballpark, in terms of amount of money, percentage of money in the ground?
I don't know if we've said publicly, but since
this is a great opportunity to do it, though.
Well, I think, I'm like, could someone get mad at me for saying this? But I don't think so.
I don't think so. You're CEO of the firm.
That's right. I'll tell you, we're about halfway through deploying the early stage fund. Thank you for even recognizing that they are different funds. I think a lot of the headlines are like, oh, this huge fund. It's actually different funds with different mandates. So we have an early stage fund, $500 million, invest in seed, Series A, opportunities like this. And that's about 50% deployed. I think the later stage fund, which invests in later stage companies, hopefully some, Dan, that will eventually be going public. Well, hopefully some will eventually go public too. Equity businesses, like hopefully, the next Coinbases or things.
Well, let me ask about that. There was.
But that's about 60%, I think, just to answer the question.
There were some reports last year that kind of that coming out of call it the FTX winter, however you want to define that, that Haun Ventures invested in some kind of big, call them unicorn crypto companies. You mentioned Chainalysis earlier. Did you invest in it?
We did. We invested in Chainalysis, though, after post-FTX. There's no denying that we have had a crypto winter, as you just called it, and I think many in the industry call it that. And during the depths of the crypto winter, we had what we call a harpoon list. Those are businesses, because we've seen crypto cycles before. I mean, no one was really anticipating FTX, but we've seen, go back to Mt. Gox, go back to Poloniex, we've seen kind of spectacular failures. Also, at the time of FTX, we were global macro uncertainty, a lot of other factors going on. People had written off a lot of late-stage growth companies in general, and that was certainly true for crypto. We actually developed what we call a harpoon list. Chainalysis was on it. A couple other companies were on it.
Such as?
Fireblocks, we're announcing today. Fireblocks is a software company. And during the depths of the winter, we went on our harpoon list and said, let's go get some meaningful ownership. We still are believers in this space. We're taking a 7 to 10 year view of the space. And we know what's working. These companies have metrics. By the way, protocols also.
So take Fireblocks. What was the thing you thought was working with them?
Well, look, any company that is growing during a crypto bear market, we thought, imagine what it will do when the market matures. Same with Chainalysis. Chainalysis grew 35% during the crypto bear market. We also thought the founding teams were pretty special. If you think about Fireblocks, what does it do? For those who don't know, Fireblocks is a software, it's basically a software business. I mean, your next guest, David Sachs, would probably like this business. And so it basically allows enterprises, and its customers are enterprises. So customers like hundreds of years old bank, like BNY Mellon, to fintechs like Revolut. They need a way to securely store and manage their digital assets. And they use Fireblocks. And what do you, if you think about what you really think is really important when enterprises need to securely store and manage their crypto assets, number one thing comes to mind. Let's see if you get it.
Number one thing that comes to mind is security.
Thank you.
Okay.
Security. It's security. And so this founding team is a group of cybersecurity experts. That's their DNA. They founded a prior business involving that. And they had software that did this. And the metrics had run. We looked at the ARR. We looked at the churn. We looked at all of the traditional metrics that you would judge a later stage company by. And we thought, this is a great company. We had also known the founder, Michael Sholov, through our time in the crypto space.
And you got these in through secondaries primarily?
Well, so these were actually, I would say, founder-led. They're not founder secondaries. Those founders weren't selling the.
No, but I mean, but secondaries from existing investors.
Yeah, we actually, what we did is a variety of strategies, depending on if you're talking about Chainalysis or if you're talking about Fireblocks. We have other Harpoon investments we haven't yet announced. So the notion that we were going slow or, oh, what's going on, the reality is we weren't out there publicizing what we were doing because we didn't want other funds to go do that. It would be more competition for these, you're calling secondaries. I would call them amalgamation of different sources. Some were through secondaries, some were through investors who got in at higher market prices. Others were, well, it was a variety of different sources. And I think the important thing is it was founder-led because the founders saw the value our team would bring to their cap table, and we saw a tremendous partner and a really growing business. So it's Chainalysis, it's Fireblocks, and maybe next time we talk, we'll have a couple others to announce.
Let me talk to you a little bit about the FTX winter, and specifically FTX. Is the reason that you were at Andreessen, then you had your own shop, both of which, while FTX was still at least on the outside, a viable business. If you hadn't been affiliated with Coinbase, do you think you would have invested in it?
Well, some who were, well, some have. I don't.
Okay, why didn't you?
There are many reasons. I mean, one was the valuation by the time we had a fund was really astronomical. If you look at that valuation, which I think it was $32 billion, there was no board, there was no CFO, there weren't basic kind of governance.
Sequoia didn't care.
Look, I think that the reality is we had been in the crypto space for a long enough time. We had traditional things we looked for that any venture investor would look for. TAM, founder, market opportunity, but we also look really seriously at regulatory. I mean, as you mentioned, I'm a former federal prosecutor. We take that stuff really seriously. We take seriously, my board experience at Coinbase told me to take seriously that there's a board there. There's governance, and even, by the way, when Coinbase was a private company. So I think all of those things counsel against. I don't know if Sam Bankman-Fried would have wanted us anyway. I mean, again, like, probably as I think about it, he probably wouldn't have wanted us on the board. I would have been asking too many questions now that I think about it. And you think about Brian and the Coinbase team, they welcome those questions because they have nothing to hide. They're running a business, a really growing business and exciting business.
After Sam was convicted, you did a kind of a tweet storm of sorts, and you kind of predicted what you thought the prison sentence would be based on your prosecutorial experience, and you were pretty damn close. You got very close to what the judge actually gave him, which I guess 25 years, is that 25 years?
Something like
okay.
27.
So you were right on the numbers. From a pure justice perspective.
Yeah.
Is that the right amount of time? Is that deserved?
Well, look, people always ask me this when I was prosecuting other crimes, like you're advocating for this or that sentence. What I'm advocating for is the jury has made a conviction. I'm there to give the sentencing recommendation when I was in the government of how the guidelines work. And this is what I was pointing out to people who were like, Sam Bankman-Fried's never going to go to jail a day in his life after he was convicted. I said, that's just not in line with reality. We have these things called sentencing guidelines, and they work a specific way. It's actually a mathematical formula. You can go look it up online. It's actually not rocket science to go calculate it.
But leaving those are, as you said, those are guidelines that have been written before and after.
Yeah.
Is it just?
Yeah.
Leaving, if there were no guidelines and the judge had just picked a number, would you say, yeah, that's right?
Look, I think it's hard to say. I will say that it was a massive fraud. It was the largest financial fraud in history. People have different views on whether victims were made whole. I don't think, I will tell you right now, there are going to be victims that are not made whole of that. And if you think about the theory of criminal prosecution, which, can we talk about crypto and not just criminal prosecution? If you think about I'll wrap on, if you think about the theory of criminal prosecution, it's not just to make victims, for restitution and to make victims whole, it's to deter future crimes. And I think there's no question that a sentence of that magnitude sends a pretty big deterrent message out there. And I'm not going to opine whether it's a fair sentence. I didn't sit through the trial. I was not actually acquainted with the facts as many people think I would. I watched it just like you from afar. But I will say that you have to think about the theory overall of the deterrent message, the scope of the magnitude of the crime. You're talking about billions of dollars of people's money lost. So let's move on to talk about what's exciting.
We're going to, it's an investment question tied to that. Okay. Did Hahn Ventures buy any of the creditor claims?
No, we did not.
Did you think about it?
We explored whether that would be a good idea. I think the reality is we like to make our investments based per investment, not as a basket. And I think too many times, maybe we missed some opportunities there, but too many times when you're buying a whole basket, I don't like the bundling theory of investments. I like to go investment by investment, and I think our team likes to go investment by investment.
Coming out of 2023, coming out of that winter, and you talk about the kind of stuff you look for Harpoon list, have you seen, when you think of kind of before and after when it comes to competition for deals among other venture capitalists, is there less now because a lot of, say, the generalists who launched crypto practices got scared and ran away and didn't come back, or are we back to where it was from a competitive landscape prior?
It really depends. We invest at all layers of the stack, so we're investing at the protocol layer. By the way, it wasn't just equity, late-stage equity businesses we've done. We've done certain token projects. During that bear market of which you spoke, we invested in things like Bitcoin or Ethereum or Solana, for example. During the time where, apparently we weren't doing any investments. We just haven't announced a lot of investments. And I think that for those, there wasn't really competition because, I guess you could go buy it.
I could not, but go on.
Oh, you could not, but another fund could. On the early stage fund that you mentioned, and that's the $500 million fund, we are seeing a lot of competition. The fact of the matter is there are a lot of...
Can I ask, mostly from crypto-specific funds or from generalists?
Mostly from crypto-specific funds. However, there are some generalists that are back now. There's a market story and there's an innovation story when you talk about crypto, and the two don't always go hand in hand. And so sometimes, because crypto is this technology and an innovation that has a real-time price feed attached to it, and that makes for very cyclical market stories. But the innovation story is, there's a lot going on. At the same time FTX was going on, a lot of people who weren't paying attention to the space missed the fact that Ethereum, the merge happened, the largest software upgrade ever in history, with zero downtime. That's pretty exciting. We've seen a lot of other architectural breakthroughs. People in our space talk about the rise of L2s, which is the kind of, essentially, for those who don't know what an L2 is, it's a scale, you'd ask me about your parents. It's a scaling solution. It's like,
you've already lost them.
Go faster.
That part's good. I'm wondering, there seems to be a lot of startups that are coming out with tokens now that weren't before. Do you have any companies in your portfolio, maybe on the earlier stage side, that weren't going to, but in the last several months have said, no, we're gonna take a shot at this?
We are going to launch a token, you mean?
That we are going to.
Oh, well, we actually have seen an interesting phenomenon in this kind of innovation cycle, where we have businesses that have ARR, software kind of style metrics, ARR, churn, et cetera, and they're actually also network businesses. And so this is really interesting. These companies, we think, some of these companies in this category, and we haven't announced some of those investments yet. We've done about 8 early stage investments that we haven't announced. In fact, one announcement, you can ask him about it, or don't ask him about it, he's here for something else, but we're co-leading an early stage deal with David Sachs, your next speaker.
Are we able to talk more about that or no?
It's just, what I can tell you is it's a narrative violation because it's an AI founder who pivoted into crypto 18 months ago.
It isn't. We have very little time left. Let me just ask quickly. There is finally maybe some comprehensive crypto regulation, which is going to get voted on by the House. It doesn't sound like the Senate has any interest in this. How important is that to you as an investor in the industry that something like FIT21 becomes law?
Well, look, I think that the fact that we even have legislation being introduced shows the inevitability of crypto. So that's important. It's important that in this country we get regulatory clarity. I know a lot of people get accused of, oh, they say they want regulatory clarity, they don't. It is very true, though, that we do on certain things. We want custodians to be able to custody crypto. We want these service providers like accountants not scared to be auditing crypto companies' books. We want financial services companies.
Do you think it matters? There's a movement in some parts of crypto that have embraced Trump, who seems to sort of be embracing crypto, and he certainly didn't when he was president. Obviously, you mentioned this SEC. Under Biden has been pretty hostile to crypto. From just a pure crypto perspective, does it matter who the next president is?
I think the fact that we're even having the discussion and it's a campaign issue shows how far the industry has progressed and why this is still an important issue in the economy. It's not just the presidential election, Dan. The other two branches of government, Article 2 and Article 3, you just mentioned, there's some crypto legislation that's been introduced. Not just one piece, you're talking about FIT 121, but there's a stablecoin bill out, the market structure bill, and it's bipartisan. And that's really important. Those legislative proposals are bipartisan, but also the courts. Why did the Bitcoin ETF get approved this year? It was not because Gary Gensler and the SEC had a change of heart. It was because a unanimous panel of the DC Circuit, one level off from the US Supreme Court, unanimously ruled the SEC was arbitrary and capricious and had done regulatory overreach, essentially. And you had Judge Naomi Rao on the one hand and Judge Sri Srinivasan on the other hand. And those are two very ideologically diverse judges. I'll say that. So I think it does not need to be a political issue. I hope it does not become a political issue. But I will say the fact that we're even having this conversation across all three branches of government shows to me the really inevitability of the technology.
Katie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dan.
Appreciate it.
Thanks
so much.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
And now for our final conversation of the day. My next guest has been a founder. He was part of the PayPal Mafia. He is an investor who runs his own firm. He launched a new company today, and I believe he also maybe has a small podcast. Some of you might have heard. Welcome, David Sachs. I didn't see the pin. The pin is a nice ad. So, David, we have a lot to talk about today, but let's start. You're wearing a T-shirt and now apparently a pin, which is a channels crossed out. If you can't see this, you launched a company this morning called Glue. I am assuming this is not an arts and craft company. It seems to be a Slack killer.
Yeah.
Why does Slack need to be killed?
Well, everyone hates channels. Am I right? I mean, aren't you guys sick of looking at all the channels? You have to go through all the channels. We keep hearing, I demoed this for Chamath, and he said, you had me at no channels. So the problem is that to find that one thread that you need to see, you have to join the whole channel because that's the unit of conversation, and then you get all this noise. So everyone in the company ends up in every channel. And what we've heard over and over again from teams is that as they get bigger, channels just don't scale. So I think the industry was yearning for a different type of chat solution even before ChatGPT came out. And we were working on it, and then ChatGPT came out, and we kind of realized that this was the direction. If you look at ChatGPT, it's just single focused topical threads that sit in your sidebar. It's just not multiplayer, but that's kind of the model that people want, is just you create a thread, you address it to the people and groups that you care about, they get it, and it's just a much simpler model. And then the other thing we've done is we've incorporated AI fully so that it's just like a virtual member of your team.
And GPT you brought into it?
Yeah. So, well, we're sort of LLM agnostic. So, we work with ChatGPT, we work with Claude. We're going to incorporate, every model we can.
We can put up, I know we have a slide quickly, kind of what this looks like. Hopefully they can put up in the back. There it is. So let me ask, okay, so you think people get channel fatigue. Why, if they start using Glue regularly and build up enough inside their company, why won't they get thread fatigue just like they got channel fatigue?
Well, because you just get the threads that you care about. So it's just much more precise. So
in the sense of, though, if you're somebody inside a company who people take you within craft, right? They always think you should, maybe not always, think you should be aware of things that are happening. They want your advice on things. You could just start getting tagged over and over and over again.
Yeah, I could, but still someone has shown an intent to include me. The problem right now is that you have to go through all your channels to make sure you're not missing something. I mean, you can be tagged in Slack as well.
Yeah.
So it's just the channel model just doesn't scale. A better unit of conversation is the thread. That is the way that, for example, AI chats work.
Yep. It's the way Yammer used to work.
Yammer was feed-based. So yeah, we've kind of gone from feeds was the model back in roughly 2008 because social networking was the big disruption. And then we moved to kind of IRC channels with Slack, and then now we're in the era of ChatGPT. And so we just think that people want simple threaded conversations, but importantly, they want AI to be a full member of the team and the chat.
Yeah.
And so one of the problems with Slack is if you want to ask AI a question, you just got to do it through your DM. It's like it's not a team experience.
You were, obviously, you founded Yammer, you sold to Microsoft, you were an early investor in Slack. Do you feel weird at all basically trying to, I mean, I know Yammer as a brand doesn't exist anymore, they've incorporated in something else. Do you feel weird at all trying to take both of them out?
No, not at all. It's a space I've had an interest in for a while. So, you know, the guys on the pod joke that Glue is Yammer 3.0, where there was Yammer, and then there was Slack, which is kind of like Yammer 2.0, and then this is Yammer 3.
One of the things about it, so you showed me kind of some of the stuff last week. We kind of went over it a little bit, and one of the things I found interesting about it was it's not just that you and I or if we're in the same company having a conversation or we're part of a thread. The system itself is able to kind of ingest the corpus of information that's gone into it from all of those threads and conversations, I think excluding direct messages, and it can make suggestions to you, et cetera. There's some dystopian pieces of this, though, right? That if I'm an employee at a company and I'm like, wait, the CEO can figure out, am I the least productive member of the team? Am I the one who comes up with the worst ideas? Am I the one who came up with that terrible idea? I was the first one to say it. Any concern that people are going to look at this inside a company and say, yeah, this is not a system I want to introduce myself to?
Well, you could call it dystopian, or you could call it kind of awesome. I think it's kind of awesome. I mean, look, so I've been using Glue inside of Craft Ventures now for a year, and because AI has access to the chat history, I can do things like say, who at Craft has contributed the most to deal flow? And it will actually render an opinion about that.
And who's contributed the least to deal flow?
Well, haven't asked that question. Maybe I should try that. But yeah, I can ask things like who at Craft knows the most about this vertical or this topic, and it gives me some really good answers. It's pretty mind-blowing, actually, what it can do. I've asked it, should I invest in this company? It'll give me an argument. It'll give me a summary of the arguments for and against investing, but based on the chat history where people have been talking about it. But they've been talking about it, in several different places, and it can essentially produce an investment memo for me.
I'm just curious, is it exclusive to stuff that's inside? So, for example, so you guys are having a conversation, but the next day, yesterday, the Journal had a front page story about fraud at said company for whatever reason. Does it ingest that as well? Does it know that if one of you hasn't put it in there?
No, well, you have to tell it if you want it to go look on the web or something like that. But the point is just that it has access to all of your chat history and all the attachments and all your app integrations.
You mentioned that it's LLM agnostic, but GPT is part of it. You obviously saw the rollout yesterday. Of everything you saw come out, what was the most interesting iteration or most important thing, if not for Glue, but just in general?
Yeah, so I think the most valuable thing for Glue is just that GPT 4.0 or Omni, it's much more performant than the previous version. They say it's twice as fast. I believe that. Honestly, in Glue, it felt 10 times as fast.
Really?
We've already incorporated it. So for our purposes, it's the best LLM at this moment. But that could change over time.
But speed right now for you is the main differentiator?
Yeah, speed and cost, I guess, but and reasoning capabilities. And then, context window is important too. The bigger the context window gets, the more information you can feed into it to synthesize. But look, these foundation models are going to be in a constant state of competition with each other, and we just want to ride that wave as they get better and better to take advantage of those capabilities. We don't know who's going to win, so we're going to integrate with all the key players, and then again ride that wave.
Something you've talked about on the podcast a bunch is this question of open source versus closed source when it comes to these LLMs. Where exactly do you come? Not where do you come down on, because you say we don't know who's going to win this, but do you believe it's going to be a closed model that becomes, if not dominant, at least quasi wins this?
No, I mean I
can ask in the context of Glue. In 5 years, if Glue's hopefully still around and doing well, where's most of that work going?
Well, so Llama 3 is already at the point where it's roughly as good as some versions of GPT-4, maybe GPT-4 Turbo. It's not as good as GPT-0 that they just released. So OpenAI has managed to stay ahead of open source by some number of months, 3 months, 6 months, and the question is whether they can hold on to that lead or not. But
do you think that's because they're just better engineers, or is that because they started first?
Probably head start, and then then they were able to use the head start to attract a lot of talent, and it feeds on itself.
In terms of Glue, Craft seeded it. How long until it goes out and tries to raise an A?
We'll probably do that soon. Yeah.
Ballpark how much you want to raise?
It'd be like a normal Series A.
Which is in this world sometime. I've seen some Series A's of some companies say AI and they've raised hundreds of millions. So
I know we're not going to try and do anything crazy. It just you just never know where a round's going to land until you go through the process.
You announced last question on this. I guess you announced Glue this morning. About an hour and a half, 2 hours later, Facebook announced that it is shutting down its kind of quasi-rival product. Coincidence? Happy? Early investor in Facebook?
Yeah, I think it shows how hard this space is. I mean, people think it's easy. It's like, oh, you can just copy, work chat or whatever. Actually, there's a lot of really subtle product interactions and usability concerns. And you really have to get the details right. It doesn't really matter if you're a huge company like Facebook or Meta. If you don't really understand the nuances of workplace communication, you won't get it right. So this is a space that we've been involved in for a long time. And I think we've created a product that actually is better than what currently exists. So that's hard to do.
24 hours ago, did you view Facebook as part of the competitive set that you guys were going to compete with, or did you not really consider that as a major player?
I mean, it was on our radar, but Teams and Slack were the two biggest, obviously.
Glue obviously is kind of part of Craft's mission, investment mission for the most part is kind of B2B startups. Are there any B2B startups you see now, the things you do, the things you don't do, that don't have an AI component at this point?
Well, I would say that most SaaS apps are trying to figure out how to incorporate AI into their product roadmap. So for sure, but there's exceptions. There are some companies where it's just not applicable yet. I mean, Elon said that he hasn't figured out how to make AI applicable to SpaceX, for example. So it's just some companies it's not going to be, at least not yet.
How often do you get pitched a company that is, call it AI powered, AI enabled or whatever, and you look and go, no, you're not. Like, that's nice in the press release, but not only are you not, it's not even aspirational, like there's nothing here.
Well, at this point, I think most of the startups that are pitching AI actually are doing something with AI. That was more of a concern, I think, several years ago, where there was a lot of fake AI going on. But at this point, most of the AI ideas they have some nexus to AI.
I'm correct in saying you guys. Am I correct in saying Kraft is not invested in any of the LLM companies? Or am I wrong about that?
Well, nothing's been announced yet.
So what have you invested in, David?
Well, I mean, so there's different levels of the stack, right? And
Yep.
I think we're basically application investors. So our view is that what's happening at the model layer is really interesting and it's great. And we're now just beginning to scratch the surface of what's going to happen at the application layer. Obviously, Glue is an example of that. I think the key for apps is you want to think about as those foundation models become more and more powerful, does that help you or hurt you? If it helps you, great, you want to ride that innovation wave.
Yeah.
If it hurts you because you just got obsoleted, you just got eaten by the underlying platform layer, that's a really big problem. So for example, with GPT-4o, some of those conversational abilities that got rolled out, I wonder, what does that do to all the companies that are working on like, virtual customer support reps or virtual sales reps, where a big part of their product roadmap was working on the conversational abilities. Now, if they were working on a different piece, like say workflow, then they'll be fine, and they let the model just do more of the conversation piece. But if what they had spent the last 2 years doing was conversation, they just became obsolete. So you have to be very, very careful when you're building on top of these models to understand where their innovation ends and your innovation begins.
You talked about what a traditional Series A, and I mentioned that so many of these companies, particularly on the foundational model side, have raised just insane amounts of money, kind of remarkable amounts of money. Do you think is there going to be a venture bloodbath when it comes to a lot of these companies that have raised $5, $6, $1 billion literally going to nothing?
I think that always happens.
Maybe never though with this amount of money going into individual companies.
Well, I would say that there's two kinds of bubbles out there. If you look at history, there's kind of tulip bubbles and there's railroad bubbles. So tulip bubbles are basically, the whole thing is like a greater fool theory. It's a mania. The thing just doesn't have that much underlying value. Then you got railroad bubbles where actually you're building something that has immense value, and maybe you have a period of overinvestment, but then the ROI on that eventually catches up. The dot-com bubble was actually like that. It took 15 years or something, but finally the return on investment did finally even pay off that bubble that we had in '99. So I don't even think we're at bubble levels yet in AI. I don't. But
when do you identify? How do you identify a bubble? How do you identify the peak of a bubble in your mind?
Well, there's some froth, but right now, but it doesn't just psychologically.
Some froth.
Yeah, for sure, there's some froth, and look, I mean, VCs are always kind of herding into the next big thing, but just psychologically, it doesn't feel like the bubble we had in either 1999 or in, say, 2021. And part of that is also about the macro environment plays a role. It's harder to have a bubble when you've got high interest rates or relatively high interest rates. When money is really loose and free, you start getting a lot more speculation.
So you think there was more bubbleiciousness, call it 3 years ago than there is now?
Oh yeah, 2021 was the peak.
Speaking of 2021, it's also when venture-backed companies were still going public. They basically don't do that anymore. Read a couple of small exceptions. I've written about this a little bit. Almost any time I talk to a limited partner, not a craft one per se, although probably some of them too, they're annoyed with venture capitalists as an asset class. They want their money back, or they want distributions. They want distributions. They gave you money. They'd like money. They look and they say these companies keep raising more money at higher valuations still. No one has the guts to go public. Are you trying to push any of your companies to go public?
You can't really push them.
Yes, you can. They did that.
Well,
it just changed when VCs became, quote, founder friendly.
Well, see, I don't think VCs are the reason that companies are going public or not going public. I think that it has everything to do with the market. And so, for example, a few years ago, you could go public with 100 million of ARR as a SaaS company, not really a problem. Now, and the market kind of looks with
What do you
more
think you need
scrutiny
for a
at that.
SaaS company? What's the threshold?
Like 500 really is a much more comfortable place. So it's just harder because the bar is higher, because the market is more skeptical right now. I'm talking about the public market, the buyers ultimately. Also, valuations are just lower because, again, interest rates have gone up, so the discount rates are higher. So I think it's just a tougher environment. That's the main reason. It's got less to do with VCs.
Has that changed your calculus when you're investing in companies now? The fact that if you were investing 5 years ago, company needed 100 to go out, now it's going to need $500 million. Does that change the sorts of companies you're willing to back?
Not really. We're thinking very long term. I mean, if a LP is worried about getting their money back in 1 year, 2 years, even 5 years, well, 10 to 12 years starts getting very reasonable because these are 10 to 12 year funds typically. So I think that's reasonable. But look, if you need the money soon, do not invest in a venture fund. This is not the right time frame for that type of investment. Just put your money in the market and keep it liquid.
Speaking of investments, I'm curious, did you invest, or are you investing in XAI?
Yes, yes. I mean, it's not, we should let the company kind of do their own announcement, but I've told other people that we're participating.
Again, I'm just curious, basic explanation, basic reason why?
Well, we're believers in Elon.
Did you end up investing in X? There were obviously some leaked messages between you, and it sounded like you said, we're willing to invest, but I don't have the kind of check sizes you're really looking for. Are you actually invested in the main company?
We don't really have a vehicle to do like private equity type investments. That was a very novel structure for us, so we actually didn't end up participating. It's just we didn't really have a vehicle for that at the time.
Did you think about doing an SPV or something like that, or not worth doing?
We haven't done SPV. It's just complicated.
You were known for being kind of in that war room for the first week or two. What do you think was your main contribution in that war room?
What was my main contribution?
Or what did you feel your role was?
I don't know if it was a role. It was more just like I was there to kind of pitch in and help out.
In retrospect, looking back, what did you pitch or help out most with?
You know what? It was just a matter of gathering information and then helping to synthesize and present it in an informal way so that better decisions can be made. That's basically it.
Which was a more hectic situation, when you were promoted to become CEO of Zenefits, or that week and a half or whatever at the beginning of Twitter?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if they're both somewhat hectic.
But I'm curious, so for those who don't know, so you were this is prior to Kraft, you were at Zenefits, the whole scandal happened there, you were promoted CEO, the reputation you got was the person who righted the ship. Mm-hmm. When you talk about froth in the VC market, are you surprised that Parker has raised an enormous amount of money for a new company?
Not really. I mean, he always had a strong vision in that space, and it's not that hard to raise money, so.
I should rephrase. Are you surprised that VCs gave him so much money, given the history?
No, I mean, especially during that time period, it's still relatively easy to raise capital for venture.
That's fair. Is there anything within Kraft, when you look at kind of your model and what you're looking at, is there something you're looking to expand into? I mean, you talked about how you didn't do X because you didn't have a private equity-like vehicle. You do have a growth fund. You do have an early-stage fund. Is there some, call it, third leg of that stool you want to launch at some point from an investment standpoint?
Not really. I mean, we just kind of keep it simple. There's kind of early stage venture and there's kind of growth. We see early stage as seed and A, and then growth for us is B and C.
Okay.
And we just keep it pretty simple. We're not interested in doing anything complicated. We haven't done SPVs. We haven't done private equity deals. It's just try to keep it simple.
Do you feel your deal flow is significantly better since All In started and became popular than before that? You obviously had all the relationships before that.
Yeah, I mean, people ask me if All In is good for business or not. I mean, it's probably on the whole better. I think there's a lot of...
You think there are deals you lose because of it?
Probably. I mean, there's a lot of VCs out there trying to be all things to all people, and that's obviously not me. People are either going to like me or hate me based on what they hear, but hopefully what they hear on the pod is that, aside from whatever views I take, that I present the logic and reasoning behind it, so hopefully they like my thought process. And if as a result of that they want to work with me, great, and if they don't, that's fair too.
What percentage of your time right now do you feel you devote to being a venture capitalist compared to podcast guest, Twitter power user?
Is there really a difference in those two jobs?
For some, I'm sorry, Twitter power user talking about things that have relatively nothing to do with technology and investing.
The pod is something we do once a week, so it's...
But for you, how much prep goes into that? Do you just hop on and you just talk whatever Jason says, or do you sit
No,
there?
I mean, like we have a topic list that sometimes it comes together at the last minute, sometimes it comes together a day or two before. I try to do, a couple hours of let's call it research on the topic, so like I'll have receipts for my arguments, things like that.
I guess the reason I ask, do you view yourself in 5 or 10 years still being a venture capitalist, full-time venture capitalist?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've signed up for 10-year funds, and we're on fund 4. So.
Do you want to run for office at some point?
No.
Not at all? Really?
No, I really don't have any desire to do that.
Why not? As somebody who clearly has a lot of very strong views on a lot of things political, why don't you want to, for lack of a better term, be in the arena?
Well.
Part of the arena.
Yeah, so I think the job of a politician is different than the job of somebody who just cares about issues and advocates for issues on something, or influences on a podcast. And so, yeah, I do have issues that I care about, and I do try to advocate for them when I feel like the country's on the wrong track, particularly. But that doesn't mean I would want to do the day-to-day job of a politician. I mean, a politician, basically, you fundraise and you push a button. In Washington, that's kind of the job. And I don't want to demean it too much, but that's most of the day-to-day. It's not a fun job to do. So, if on the margins I can have a very small impact trying to influence the debate on issues I care about, that's kind of good enough for me.
You do fundraising, though, although you're doing it on behalf of other people. Are you holding a fundraiser for Trump in the city next month?
So the way we're approaching it on the pod is that we did an event for a couple of candidates, where we did an event for Bobby Kennedy, and we did an event for Vivek Ramaswamy, where they came on the pod, and then we did a fundraiser for them. So so having done it with Kennedy, we have extended an invitation to both Trump and Biden, and we're waiting to kind of hear back. So far, the Trump people seem more open to it than the Biden people.
So if there's a fundraiser, that means there'll also be an interview on the pod?
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
I can't commit. I don't. It's not locked down yet. That'd be my hope.
For you though, and as somebody who does have kind of strong opinions on things, as part of that, do you feel? How do you get your mind around trying to raise money for someone who, I mean, to some extent you support, but you aren't necessarily going to pull a lever for?
Well, I think part of the reason you do a fundraiser is that you have some sort of commonality with a candidate, and it doesn't mean you agree with them on everything, because that's just impossible. There's no candidate who's like just a perfect issue overlap for you. I've done events for Ro Khanna because I respected his position on free speech and civil liberties and the use of diplomacy in foreign policy. I did an event for Kirsten Sinema back when she was a Democrat, because I thought she was good on the whole budget issue. And in any event, you try to find common ground, and the way events are kind of the way that you interact with the political system. It creates a forum for you to get to know a candidate better, or an elected official. Maybe they're not even running at that point, and it's a way for you to include your friends and business associates, and it provides a little bit of a service that way for people who want to participate.
For the candidate, it raises the money.
For the candidate, but also people in the community who want to learn more. So, and then it's kind of a fun thing to do. You're hosting these types of things. So, Yeah, I mean, it's just, this is like the way that if you want to participate in some small way, this is kind of how it works.
Do you, the kind of the stances you've taken, whether it's been geopolitics, domestic policies, et cetera, when it comes to raising money for craft, do you think that's cost you either, if not cost you an LP, have any of the LPs said, basically shut up, please?
You know, I have not heard that. Look, it's possible that there are LPs out there that we're not going to get because they don't like some of my views. It's definitely possible.
Or if not your views, just the fact that you're out there advocating for anything, really.
It's possible, but you know, like I said, there's a lot of VCs out there who are just totally plain vanilla and undifferentiated and never say anything and don't seem to care about anything. And it's just like, you know, the world doesn't need another one of those. So I'd rather be a little bit edgy. Hopefully I do it in a thoughtful way, but I'm also just being honest about what I believe. And then if there are people who want to work with me based on that, great. And if they don't, that's fine too. You know, I'm not, you know.
If Trump comes on the pod and you do a fundraiser for him, something you said, obviously, and you know this, on the pod in the days after January 6th, you said that Trump, quote, had disqualified himself from being a candidate at a national level ever again. But if you hold a fundraiser for him, what changed?
Well, Biden's done 5 things to disqualify himself since then. So, you know, look, if I had to judge all these candidates according to some like perfect standard, I think.
No, but your standard. You said he wasn't qualified.
Well, neither is Biden. You know, I think none of them seem qualified.
So is this a lesser of two evils?
Well, look, I said very early on that, and polling showed this, the vast majority of the American public did not want to have a rematch of 2020. Right. But that's what we've got. So we're at this place. And politics very often is a choice. Do you want to go in that direction or that direction? And, you know, you can harp on, you know, small things here or there. But at the end of the day, again, it's just, do you want to go that way or that way? And, you know, I'd say at this point, bigger disagreements with Biden than with Trump.
Speaking of disagreements, what from a call it a tech economy perspective? So there's a lot of obviously issues, not general interest. What is the most important issue you think in this election in terms of the difference between Biden and Trump when it comes to things that impact the tech industry from a true business perspective?
I mean, look, just the other day, Biden announced a capital gains tax of 44%.
Which you won't get.
Well, I don't know why you say that, because it was in the original, some version of this was in the original Build Back Better budget, and the only reason that didn't pass is because Manchin and Sinema opposed it, okay? Now, if Biden wins re-election and the Democrats get the trifecta like they had in Biden's first 2 years, but without Manchin and Sinema because they're not running again, then it stands every possibility of passing. So I don't think you can just say, oh, well, he's taking that view, that's a horrible policy, but we can just ignore it because it's never going to pass. I don't think you know that. I look at that and say, that policy is terrible. I'm not going to vote for my own financial liquidation. More importantly, the liquidation of Silicon Valley and the whole way that we do business. 44% capital gains tax, that would be 56% when you add California, plus, I didn't even get to this part, 25% unrealized gains tax. You guys ready for that? You raise a Series B or Series C and all of a sudden you're taxed. You haven't made $1. It's not $1 in your bank account, but now you got to pay 25% of the paper value of your gains. We saw this happen with AMT.
Like an LP paying a management fee. It's terrible.
What's that? No. Well, okay, that's a whole different question. But no, it's not. It's really not a management fee. This is it's an onerous tax, and what it's most like actually is the AMT. Remember that when AMT first passed, they said this is only going to apply to super rich people. No, it didn't. It ended up hitting founders very badly, where they would have paper gains that could trigger the AMT and then have a huge tax, and there's a huge liquidity pinch. The same thing would happen here. I don't think that our whole, the whole way that Silicon Valley works based on stock options and, let's say widespread ownership of companies will survive in its current form if you have this 25% unrealized gains tax. Now, again, you can say, well, it'll never pass, but I think it's a pretty good reason for Silicon Valley to think really hard about who it wants to vote for. Same thing in the crypto ecosystem. I mean, Biden basically has let Elizabeth Warren and Gensler run.
You think Trump would be better on crypto?
100%. He just said in an interview the other day.
He did. You don't think that was just pure pandering?
It might have been pandering, but at least he's saying the right thing, and Biden is not saying the right thing. At least if he's pandering, there's a higher chance that maybe he'll do the right thing.
Let me ask one final question to you, which is non-political, kind of on a less divisive, positive note. Mm-hmm. You've been in the Valley for a very long time. You kind of, from PayPal on. Is there somebody you think about who's kind of been part of the growth of tech in the Valley who isn't incredibly well known? It's not Elon, it's not Peter, it's somebody who's very under the radar who you think has been extraordinarily important and you think people should know about? or in your career?
That people don't know about? I mean,
That the average person doesn't know about.
Well, yeah, okay. Evan Owen, my co-founder at Glue.
That's
He's
a way
the
to bring
CEO
it
of
back.
Glue.
That's nice.
So yeah, he's my partner, co-founder in Glue, and he's not famous yet, but hopefully he will be after Glue gets adopted.
David, thank you. I want to thank quickly, thank you all of you for coming. Thank you to the venue here at Terra, our catering team, CSL for helping put this on, Latham & Watkins, our partner, all of you for being part of the BFD experience. We will be back in New York City for the next BFD. I know I thought we were in New York earlier. We're not. We will be, though, on October 22nd, and we have drinks downstairs, so please get drunk on us. Thank you, everybody.
All right, well, we covered a lot of ground.